2 days after I signed a check for $80,000 to pay for my son's wedding, the restaurant manager called me. His voice was shaking, whispering, like he was afraid someone was listening on the other end. He said, "Mr. Barnes, please do not put this on speaker." We were reviewing the security footage from the VIP room after everyone left. "You need to see this with your own eyes. Please come alone, and whatever you do, do not tell your wife anything." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I am Elijah Barnes, 70 years old, and I thought I had seen everything. But nothing prepared me for the knife that was about to be twisted in my back. Before I tell you what I saw on that screen, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you have ever trusted someone who turned out to be a snake. I was sitting at my kitchen table nursing a cup of black coffee. The house was quiet, that heavy, expensive silence of a suburban Atlanta morning. Sunlight was streaming through the bay windows, hitting the granite countertops I had installed just last year because Beatrice said she wanted to change. My wife of 40 years, Beatrice, was standing by the sink, humming a gospel tune while she arranged a bouquet of white lilies. She looked the picture of a devoted wife, a woman who had just seen her only son marry the woman of his dreams. I watched her for a moment. We had been through everything together, or so I thought. I built a logistics empire from one rusted truck to a fleet of 300, and she was there when we were eating beans out of a can. Now we were retired. We were supposed to be enjoying the fruits of my labor. I took a sip of coffee, feeling a sense of satisfaction. The wedding yesterday had been perfect. My son Terrence looked happy. His new wife Megan looked beautiful. I'd given them the deed to the lake house as a wedding gift, a $500,000 property signed over free and clear. Then my phone buzzed against the wood of the table. I looked at the screen. It was Tony, the manager of the Gilded Oak, the 5-star venue where we held the reception. I frowned. I had settled the bill in full and cash 2 days prior. I picked up. "Hello, Tony," I said, keeping my voice level. "Did we leave something behind?" There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. Then Tony spoke, and the terror in his voice was palpable. "Mr. Barnes, are you alone?" I looked at Beatrice. She was cutting the stems of the flowers lost in her song. "I am," I said, my instincts instantly going on high alert. 30 years in the trucking business teaches you to smell trouble before it hits the loading dock. "What is wrong, Mr. Barnes?" "Listen to me carefully. Do not put this on speaker. Do not tell Mrs. Barnes who you are talking to. We were doing the post-event security audit. There is footage from the private VIP lounge. It was recorded about 40 minutes after you and the guests left." I felt my stomach tighten. What kind of footage? Did the staff steal something? "No, sir," Tony whispered. "It is your wife and your daughter-in-law." "Mr. Barnes, you need to come down here right now. You need to see this yourself. And sir, please, for your own safety, come alone. Don't tell them where you are going." The line went dead. I sat there, the phone warm in my hand. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs that felt dangerous. My wife and my daughter-in-law, Beatrice and Megan. That did not make sense. They barely tolerated each other. Beatrice was a devout woman from the Old South, deeply religious conservative. Megan was 28, white modern, always talking about social justice and energy healing. They were oil and water. At least that is what they showed me. Honey Beatrice turned around, wiping her hands on a towel. Her smile was sweet, the same smile I had woken up to for 4 decades. "Who was that on the phone? You look a little pale." I forced my face to remain neutral. I put on the mask I used to wear when I was negotiating with union bosses who wanted to shut me down. "It was just the pharmacy." I lied. My voice sounded steady. Surprisingly, they said there was a mix-up with my blood pressure prescription. "I need to go down there and sort it out before they close for lunch." Beatrix's eyes narrowed just a fraction of an inch. A tiny micro expression that I would have missed yesterday, but today after that phone call it looked like calculation. "Oh," she said, walking over and placing a hand on my shoulder. "Do you want me to drive you? You know you shouldn't be driving that old truck if you are feeling dizzy." "I am fine, B," I said, standing up. I patted her hand and gently removed it from my shoulder. "I need the fresh air. I will be back in an hour." I walked out to the garage, my legs feeling heavy. I climbed into my 2015 Ford F-150. I had Ferraris and Mercedes in storage, but I drove the truck because it kept people from asking for money. It kept me grounded. As I backed out of the driveway, I looked up at the kitchen window. Beatrice was watching me. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was just watching her face, blank and cold. The drive to the Gilded Oak usually took 20 minutes. I made it in 15. My mind was racing, replaying the events of the wedding. I tried to find the cracks I had missed. I thought about the moment I gave them the gift. I had pulled Terrence and Megan aside during the toast. I handed them the envelope with the deed to the lake house. Terrence had cried. He hugged me and thanked me, but Megan. I replayed her reaction in my head. She had smiled yes, but it didn't reach her eyes. She had looked at the papers, checked the signature, and then looked at Beatrice across the room. It was a quick glance. It was a split second, but it was a look of confirmation, not gratitude. Victory. Why would my daughter-in-law look at my wife like they had just pulled off a heist? And why did Tony sound like he was fearing for my life? I pulled into the rear service entrance of the restaurant as instructed. Tony was waiting there, pacing back and forth near the dumpsters. He was a young Italian guy, usually impeccably dressed and confident. Today he looked like he hadn't slept. He was sweating. "Mr. Barnes?" he said, opening my truck door before I could even unbuckle. "Thank you for coming. Come inside quickly." He ushered me through the kitchen, past the chefs prepping for the lunch rush, into a small windowless security office in the basement. It smelled of stale coffee and ozone. "Sit down, Sir," Tony said, pointing to a worn leather chair in front of a bank of monitors. "Tony," I said, my voice low, "I have known you for 5 years. I tipped your staff $10,000 2 nights ago. Tell me what is going on?" Tony didn't speak. He just typed a password into the computer. He brought up a video file. The timestamp was 11:45 p.m. the night of the wedding. I pressed play. The screen showed the VIP suite. It was a private room we had rented for the bridal party to change and relax. The guests had all gone home. The cleaners hadn't arrived yet. On the screen, the door opened. Beatrice walked in. She wasn't walking with the slight limp she usually faked when we went to church. She was striding in with energy. She went straight to the minibar and popped open a bottle of Dom Perignon. A moment later, Megan walked in. She was still in her wedding dress, but she had kicked off her heels. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as my wife poured 2 glasses of champagne. She handed one to Megan. They clinked glasses. "To the stupidest man in Atlanta," Megan said, taking a long swig. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Beatrice laughed. It was a sound I had never heard before. It was harsh mocking. To Elijah she said, "The goose that lays the golden eggs." I leaned closer to the screen, my hands gripping the armrests of the chair so hard, my knuckles turned white. Megan sat down on the sofa, putting her feet up on the coffee table. "God, I thought today would never end," she said. "Did you see his face when he gave us the deed? He actually thinks I want to spend my weekends at a lake house with mosquitoes." "It is an asset, honey," Beatrice said, sitting next to her. "We liquidate it in 6 months. That is $500,000 in cash that covers your student loans and gets the condo in Miami." Wait, I thought. Beatrice hated Miami. She called it a den of sin. Megan sighed, rubbing her stomach. "I just hope Terrence doesn't get suspicious. He is so clingy. It is exhausting pretending to be attracted to him." Beatrice patted her knee. Stick to the plan. You only have to play the loving wife for a little while longer. Once the baby is born, we secure the trust fund. The clause states that once a biological grandchild is born, the $20 million family trust unlocks for the next generation. I froze. That was true. It was a clause my father had put in, and I had kept it. But how did Megan know about the specific terms of the trust? I had never told Terrence the details. Only Beatrice knew? Megan laughed again. It is hilarious. Terrence thinks this baby is his. He is so dumb. He actually believes the timeline works. My heart stopped. The room started to spin. Whatever you do? Beatrix said, her voice dropping to a serious, cold whisper. Do not let Elijah find out about the personal trainer. If he asks for a DNA test, we lose everything. We are safe, Megan said. The old man is blind. He sees what he wants to see. He thinks you are a saint and his son is a prince. He has no idea he is the only one in the room not in on the joke. I felt bile rising in my throat. My grandson, the baby I had been bragging about to my golf buddies, it wasn't my blood. It wasn't Taryn's blood. But the video wasn't over. Megan stood up and poured more champagne. So what about the main event? How much longer do I have to smell old people smell? When does Elijah, retire permanently? Beatrix took a sip of her drink. She looked directly at the camera, though she didn't know it was recording. Her face was a mask of pure malice. Soon she said, I switched his heart medication 3 weeks ago. I have been crushing dioxin into his morning smoothies. Just a little bit every day. It builds up. It looks like natural heart failure. The doctor said his heart is weak anyway. One day he will just go to sleep and not wake up. And then, my dear, we own everything. I stopped breathing. I stared at the woman on the screen, the woman who had slept beside me for 40 years, the woman who prayed over every meal. She was poisoning me. She wasn't just stealing from me. She was murdering me slowly every single morning. The video ended. The screen went black. Tony turned his chair around to face me. He looked terrified. Mr. Barnes. I didn't know what to do. If I called the police, they might confiscate the servers, and I didn't want you to be blindsided. But I couldn't let you go home to that. I sat there, a 70-year-old man who had just realized his entire life was a lie. My wife was a killer. My daughter-in-law was a fraud. My son was a cuckold raising another man's child, and I was the mark. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my mind was sharpening. The shock was fading, replaced by a cold, hard rage. It was the same rage I felt when I was 20 years old, fighting my way out of poverty. Can I get a copy of this? I asked. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, like gravel grinding together. Tony nodded. I put it on a secure flash drive for you. He handed me a small silver stick. I took it and put it in my pocket. It felt heavy like a loaded gun, like Mr. Barnes. Tony said, what are you going to do? You can't go back there. She is poisoning you. I looked at Tony. He was a good kid, Tony. I said, if I go to the police now, they will arrest them. But a good lawyer gets them out on bail in 24 hours. They will claim the video is a fake. They will claim it was a joke. They will destroy the evidence of the pills, and they will fight me for every dime of my empire while I am stuck in court. I walked to the door of the security office. No, I said. I am not going to the police. Not yet. I am going back home. Tony's eyes went wide. Sir, that is suicide. I turned back to him. No, it is reconnaissance. They think I am a senile old man who is losing his grip. They think I am weak. They think I am dying. I opened the door, letting the noise of the kitchen flood in. I am going to let them think they are winning. I am going to drink her smoothie. And I am going to make them believe I am dead. And when they think they have buried me, I am going to rise up and take everything from them. I am going to leave them with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the shame of their names. I walked out to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the flash drive in my hand. Beatrice wanted a heart attack. I was going to give her one, but it wasn't going to be mine. I started the engine. It roared to life. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed back toward the house, back toward the woman who wanted me dead. The game had changed, and Elijah Barnes was done playing nice. I sat frozen in the dark security office, staring at the monitor as the video continued to play. The timestamp on the screen moved forward only a few seconds, but my entire world was collapsing with every frame. Megan was on the screen refilling her glass of champagne. Her face was flushed with the excitement of her victory. I watched her turn to my wife, and what she said next made my blood run cold. "You know the funniest part, Beatrix?" she said, giggling. "That idiot Terrence actually thinks the timeline works. He thinks because we slept together that one time 6 weeks ago, that the baby is his. He does not even know how to do the math." Beatrice smiled that warm, motherly smile I had trusted for 40 years. "It does not matter whose it is, honey," she said soothingly. "It only matters that the DNA test never happens. Once Elijah is gone, nobody will question the lineage. The trust fund unlocks for the first grandchild, regardless of who the biological father is. As long as Terrence signs the birth certificate, the money is ours." I felt like the room was spinning. My grandson, the legacy I had built my empire for. It was a lie. Megan laughed again. "It is actually Chad's baby, my personal trainer. Can you believe it? A Barnes heir fathered by a guy who lives in a studio apartment and drinks protein shakes for dinner? But Terrence is so desperate to be a father he will believe anything." I gripped the edge of the desk. My knuckles were white. My son was being played for a fool. But then Beatrice spoke, and her words shattered whatever was left of my heart. "Do not be too hard on Terrence, dear," Beatrice said, taking a sip of her expensive wine. "He gets his gullibility from his father." Megan looked confused on the screen. "From Elijah?" she asked. "I thought you said Elijah was a shark in business." Beatrix shook her head, and her eyes gleamed with a malice I had never seen before. "Not Elijah," she said. "Elijah is not his father." I stopped breathing. The air in the security room felt suddenly thin. Tony, the manager, looked away, unable to witness my humiliation. Beatrice continued on the screen, her voice dripping with 40 years of deceit. "Terrence is Silas's son." Silas. Pastor Silas, my best friend. Bess, the man who had officiated my wedding, the man who had baptized Terrence, the man I had donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to for his church renovations. He sat at my dinner table every Sunday. He prayed over my food. He called me brother. Beatrice laughed softly. Elijah was always too busy building his trucking company. He was never home. Silas was there. He comforted me. And when I got pregnant, Elijah was so proud. He never questioned it. He just signed the check and handed out cigars. Terrence has Silas's eyes. I have spent 30 years praying Elijah never noticed. The two women on the screen clinked their glasses again. The mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, one black one, white one, deeply religious one, radically modern. In public, they acted like they could barely stand each other. Megan would roll her eyes at Beatrix's prayers. Beatrice would critique Megan's short skirts. It was all a performance, a perfectly choreographed dance to keep me distracted while they picked my pockets and planned my death. They were not enemies. They were partners in the most lucrative business deal of their lives. And the commodity they were trading was my life. I let out a roar that did not sound human. It was a guttural sound of pure animal rage. I grabbed the heavy stapler from Tony's desk and lunged at the monitor. I wanted to smash it. I wanted to destroy those smiling faces. I wanted to erase the evidence of my own stupidity. Mr. Barnes, stop. Tony moved faster than I expected. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. Let me go, Tony, I shouted, my voice cracking. I am going to kill them. I am going to burn the whole house down with them inside. Sir, listen to me, Tony pleaded, wresting the stapler from my hand. You cannot smash this screen. If you destroy this, you destroy your only advantage. I slumped back into the leather chair, my chest heaving. Advantage, I spat. What advantage, Tony? My wife is poisoning me. My son is a bastard born of my best friend. My grandchild is a stranger's mistake. I have no advantage. I am a dead man walking. Tony pulled up a chair and sat directly in front of me. He looked me in the eye. Mr. Barnes, look at this. This is not just a family dispute. This is a conspiracy. This is organized crime. They have planned this. They have executed it. If you go home now and start screaming, they will call the police. They will say you are having a dementia episode. They will say the video is a deep fake generated by AI. Have you seen the news people fake videos all the time now? Without the original file and a chain of custody, a good lawyer will tear this evidence apart in court. They will lock you up in a facility, and Beatrice will have power of attorney over your empire by tomorrow morning. His words hit me like a bucket of ice water. He was right. Beatrice was smart. She was calculating. If I confronted her now, she would play the victim. She would say I was paranoid. She would use the very poison she was feeding me to claim my mind was gone. I looked back at the screen. The video had ended. The screen was black, but the image of their toast was burned into my retinas. I was not facing a bad marriage. I was facing a hostile takeover. I had spent 40 years negotiating with union bosses, corrupt politicians, and ruthless competitors. I knew how to handle a war. I just never thought the battlefield would be my own kitchen. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to slow down. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with my handkerchief. The rage was still there, burning hot in my gut, but I pushed it down. I packed it away into a cold, hard place where I kept my business decisions. You were right, Tony, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. They want to play games. I will show them how the game is played. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Sterling. Miss Sterling was not a nice woman. She was a shark in a Chanel suit. She cost me $1,000 an hour, and she was worth every penny. She had handled my corporate mergers, and she knew where every skeleton in Atlanta was buried. I hit dial. It rang twice. Elijah, she answered. Her voice was crisp, sharp. It is Sunday. This better be a catastrophe or a billion-dollar deal. It is both, I said. Listen to me, Sterling. I need you to open a new file, codename Omega. There was a pause on the line. Sterling knew what that meant. It was the nuclear option, the protocol we had drafted years ago in case of a total corporate collapse. Omega, she repeated. Elijah, what is going on? I am liquidating, I said. I want everything frozen, the accounts, the properties, the trust funds, but I want it done quietly. I do not want a single notification sent to the house. I want you to prepare the paperwork to transfer ownership of the company. Transfer to whom, she asked. To charity, I said, to the orphanage on the west side. And Sterling, I need you to hire a private forensic toxicologist. I need a rush order on a blood test. Toxicologist Elijah, are you sick? No, I said, looking at the black screen of the monitor. I am being murdered. Beatrice has been dosing me with dioxin. I heard the sharp intake of breath on the other end. I am coming to you, she said immediately. Where are you? No, I said, if you come to me, they will know. They are watching. Beatrice is smart. She will know if I deviate from my routine. I have to go back. Go back. Elijah, are you insane? If she is poisoning you, going back to that house is suicide? It is evidence, I said, standing up. I need proof, Sterling. The video is not enough. Tony says they can claim it is fake. I need them to think they have won. I need them to think the poison is working. So what is the plan? She asked, her voice tight. I am going home, I said. I am going to walk into that kitchen. I am going to kiss my wife, and I am going to drink the smoothie she makes for me. Elijah, do not do this. I have to. I said, I need to catch them in the act. I need them to call the doctor. I need them to sign the death certificate while I am still warm. I need you to have the police on standby. But do not move until I give the signal. What is the signal? She asked. You will know, I said. Just be ready. And Sterling, find out everything you can about Pastor Silas. I want to know every dirty secret that man has ever hidden under his robe. I hung up the phone. I looked at Tony. Thank you, son. I said, you saved my life today? I didn't save you yet, Sir Tony said, looking worried. You are going back into the lion's den. I buttoned my jacket. I checked my reflection in the dark monitor. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like a man who had nothing left to lose. I am not the prey, Tony, I said, walking toward the door. I am the hunter. They just don't know it yet. I walked out into the bright sunlight of the parking lot. My truck was waiting. The drive home would take 20 minutes. 20 minutes to prepare myself to look into the eyes of the woman who killed me and smile. 20 minutes to prepare to drink from the cup of betrayal. I started the engine. I thought about Terrence, my son. No, not my son. Silas's son. The boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had bailed out of trouble. The boy who was too weak to stand up to his wife and too stupid to see the truth. I felt a pang of pity for him, but it was quickly replaced by resolve. He was part of this. He was signing the papers. He was waiting for me to die just like the rest of them. I pulled out onto the road. The game was set. The pieces were moving, and Elijah Barnes was coming home to die. Or so they thought. The drive back to my house felt like a funeral procession of one. My 2015 Ford F-150 rumbled down the familiar suburban streets. But everything looked different now. The perfectly manicured lawns looked like graveyards. The white picket fences looked like prison bars. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the ignition. The silence that filled the cab was heavy. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My hands were the hands of a man who had loaded crates at 4 a.m. for 30 years. They were strong hands, but they were trembling. I was about to walk into my own home and shake hands with the devil. I looked at the front door. It was painted a welcoming red. Beatrice had chosen that color. She said it symbolized love. Now I knew it symbolized blood. I took a deep breath, pushed open the truck door, and stepped onto the concrete. I checked my pocket. The flash drive was there. The camera button disguised as a pen in my shirt pocket was active. I was not Elijah Barnes the husband anymore. I was Elijah Barnes the operator. I was going undercover in my own life. I walked to the front door and unlocked it. The smell of lavender and bleach hit me instantly. Beatrice kept a clean house. She scrubbed away dirt just like she was trying to scrub away her sins. "Honey, is that you?" Beatrice called out from the kitchen. Her voice was light melodic. It was the voice of a woman who had nothing to hide. I walked into the kitchen. She was standing by the island wearing a floral apron over her church clothes. On the counter in front of her was a tall glass filled with a thick green liquid. It was her special health smoothie. Kale, spinach, ginger, and whatever else she claimed kept my heart strong. "I am back, B," I said. My voice was rough. I cleared my throat. The pharmacy line was a nightmare. She turned and smiled. That smile used to warm me on cold nights. Now it made my skin crawl. "Well, I'm glad you are back," she said, picking up the glass. I made your smoothie. You missed it this morning with all the rushing around? You know, Dr. Sterling said you need to keep your potassium up. She walked toward me, extending the glass. The sunlight hit the green liquid. It looked innocent. It looked healthy, but I knew what was inside. Doxin, a heart medication derived from the foxglove plant. In small doses, it regulates the heart. In large doses, it stops it cold. I took the glass. The glass was cool against my palm. I looked at her. Her eyes were watching me. They were not loving eyes. They were calculating. She was watching a rat approach a trap. "Thank you, Bee," I said. I lifted the glass to my nose. I pretended to take a deep breath, savoring the aroma, but I was really analyzing it. Underneath the smell of ginger and raw spinach, there was something else. A faint chemical scent. Something bitter, like crushed almonds that had gone bad. It was subtle. If I had not been looking for it, I would have missed it. But Tony's warning was ringing in my ears. "Drink up, honey," she said softly, touching my arm. "It will make you feel better." I raised the glass to my lips. I tilted my head back, but I did not swallow. I let the thick liquid fill my mouth, holding it there against my cheeks. It tasted vile metallic. I lowered the glass and immediately grabbed the napkin I had staged in my left hand. I pretended to wipe a drip from my chin, but instead I spit the mouthful of poison into the thick, absorbent fabric. "Wow," I said, coughing theatrically. "That ginger has a kick today." Beatrice laughed. "I added a little extra to wake up your system." I brought the glass up again. I repeated the motion. I tilted the glass back, pretending to gulp. I made swallowing sounds in my throat, but every drop went into the napkin or back into the glass when I feinted a cough. It was a trick I learned 40 years ago in the dispatch yards. You pretend to drink with the union bosses so they loosen their tongues, but you stay sober enough to count the money. I set the half-empty glass down on the counter. "That is enough for now," I said, wiping my mouth with the poisoned napkin and shoving it deep into my pocket. "I need to sit down. I feel a little tired." Beatrice watched me put the glass down. She seemed satisfied. She thought I had ingested enough to do the job. "Go rest in the living room, Elijah," she said, turning back to the sink to wash a knife. "I will be in shortly. I just need to finish this arrangement." I walked into the living room and sat in my recliner. The leather creaked under my weight. Now the waiting game began. I checked my watch. It was 11:30 a.m. I needed to give the poison time to supposedly work. I needed to sell the performance of a lifetime. I sat there for 20 minutes. My heart was pounding not from the drug, but from adrenaline. I stared at the family photos on the mantel. Me and Beatrice and Jamaica Taryn's graduation, my wedding day. They were all lies. Every single one of them was a monument to my own blindness. I looked at the photo of Terrence. I looked for my features in his face. I saw nothing. I saw Silas's wide forehead. I saw Silas's weak chin. How had I not seen it before 30 minutes passed? It was time. I let out a low groan. I gripped the armrest of the chair. I started to breathe heavily, gasping for air like a fish out of water. "Beatrice," I called out, my voice weak. "Beatrice, something is wrong." I heard her footsteps. They were not running. They were not hurried. They were slow, deliberate clicks of her heels on the hardwood floor. She appeared in the doorway. She was still wearing that apron. She was still holding a dish towel. She looked at me. She did not rush to my side. She did not pull out her phone. She just stood there and watched my chest. I gasped, clutching my shirt. It feels like an elephant. I cannot breathe. I cannot. I slid out of the chair. I fell to my knees. It was a hard impact, but I did not woos. I had to make it look real. I clawed at the carpet. I let my eyes roll back in my head. I let out one final gargling breath and collapsed face down onto the rug. I lay there still. The silence in the room was deafening. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. And I could hear my own heart hammering against the floorboards, hoping she could not hear it too. I waited for the scream. I waited for the panic. I waited for her to call 911 and try to save me, even if it was just for show. But there was nothing. I heard her walk closer, click, click, click. She stopped right beside my head. I could smell her perfume. Chanel No. 5. The same perfume I bought her every Christmas. Elijah, she said. Her voice was flat. No emotion, just a test. I did not move. I held my breath until my lungs burned, then I felt it. Felt the sharp toe of her shoe dug into my ribs. She kicked me. Not hard enough to break a bone, but hard enough to wake a sleeping man. It was a kick of disrespect, a kick you give to a dead dog on the side of the road. She kicked me again harder this time. "Wake up, old man," she hissed. I remained limp. I was a sack of potatoes. I was a corpse. Then I heard a sound that will haunt me until the day I actually die. She laughed. It was a low, satisfied chuckle. It was the sound of a woman who had just won the lottery. Finally, she whispered. She walked away from me. I heard her dial a number on her phone. Pick up, she muttered. Then she spoke. "Megan, it is done. The fish is bitten. He is on the floor." I lay there facing the carpet, listening to my wife coordinate the disposal of my life. "Yes, he drank it," she said. "He went down hard." "No, he's not moving. He looks gone. Get over here now and bring the binder, the one with the medical power of attorney and the DNR. We need to have it ready for the paramedics. We cannot have them trying to be heroes." She paused, listening to the other end. "Don't worry about Terrence," she said. "I will handle him. Just get here. We have a window. I want the coroner here within the hour. I want this over before dinner." She hung up. She did not check for a pulse. She did not try CPR. She assumed the deoxin had done its job. She assumed I was a fragile old man whose heart had finally given out. She was so arrogant, so confident in her plan, that she did not even verify the kill. She walked over to the sound system. I heard the click of a button. Soft gospel music began to fill the room. It was Amazing Grace, the song she sang in the choir every Sunday. I lay there motionless, my eyes opened just a slit. I could see her feet. She was swaying slightly to the music. She was humming along. Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. She was humming a hymn while my body was supposedly cooling on her living room floor. I felt a cold rage spreading through my veins, colder than any poison. I wanted to leap up. I wanted to wrap my hands around her throat and squeeze until the humming stopped. I wanted to show her that the old man still had fight in him, but I forced myself to stay down. I forced my muscles to remain loose. This was not the time for vengeance. This was the time for intelligence. I needed them all here. I needed Megan. I needed Terrence. I needed them to sign their names on the dotted line of their own destruction. Beatrice walked out of the room, probably to unlock the front door for her accomplice. I took a tiny, shallow breath. My ribs ached from where she kicked me. My dignity ached from lying in the dirt, but my mind was clear. They thought I was the victim. They thought I was the prey. I closed my eyes as I heard a car pull into the driveway. Let them come. Let them gather around the carcass. They were about to find out that this corpse had teeth. I lay on the cold, hard floor of my living room, staring into the darkness of my own eyelids. My ribs throbbed where Beatrix had kicked me. But that pain was nothing compared to the agony of waiting. I was a corpse in my own house waiting for the vultures to land. I heard the front door open. It was not a gentle opening. It was frantic. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Heavy steps that belonged to a man. and the sharp clicking of heels that belonged to a woman who thought she owned the world. Dad, it was Terrence, my son. The boy I had bounced on my knee, the boy I had taught to tie his tie. His voice was high, tight with panic. I felt him drop to his knees beside me. His hands were clammy as he grabbed my shoulders. He shook me. Dad, wake up. Dad, can you hear me? I kept my body limp. I forced my breathing to be so shallow it was invisible. I needed to know. I needed to see what he would do. Oh my God, he is not moving. Terrence yelled, his voice cracked. He sounded like a child again, scared of the dark. Mom, what happened? I felt Beatrix step closer. Her presence was like a cold shadow. He just collapsed. Honey, she said calmly. Her voice was steady too. Steady, he drank his smoothie. He sat down and then he just fell. I think it was his heart. You know how weak it has been. Call 911, Terrence shouted. I heard the rustle of fabric as he fumbled for his phone. We have to get an ambulance. He might still be there. We can save him. For a split second, a tiny spark of hope ignited in my chest. My son wanted to save me. He was not completely lost. He was scared, but he was trying to do the right thing. Maybe he did not know about the plan. Maybe he was just a pawn. But then the spark was extinguished brutally. I heard a sharp, wet smack. It was the sound of flesh hitting flesh. A slap. Stop it, Terrence. It was Megan. Her voice was ice. It cut through the panic in the room like a razor. I heard Terrence gasp. The phone clattered to the hardwood floor. Get a hold of yourself, Megan hissed. Look at me. Look at me right now. But he is dying. Terrence wed. He is supposed to die, you idiot, she spat. Do not touch that phone. Do not call anyone. Megan, what are you saying? Terrence stammered. I lay there, my heart breaking in slow motion. I wanted to jump up and defend my son. I wanted to strike her for hitting him, but I stayed down. I had to know if he would pick that phone back up. Listen to me, Terrence. Megan said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. We talked about this. We knew this was coming. If you call 911 now, they might revive him. And do you know what happens then? He lives. He keeps control. And we stay poor. Is that what you want? Do you want to be a loser for the rest of your life, living on an allowance like a child? I am not a loser, Terrence whispered, but his voice was weak. You are a loser without his money, Megan said. You have nothing, Terrence. You are nothing without the Barnes name in the Barnes bank account. We are drowning in debt. The baby is coming. Do you want your child to grow up in a rental apartment? Do you want me to leave you because I will leave you, Terrence? I will not live like a pauper? I heard Terrence sobbing. Low, pathetic sounds. He was breaking. Just wait 15 minutes, Megan commanded. Just 15 minutes. Let his heart stop completely. Let nature take its course. Then we call the doctor. Then we call the coroner. And then we are free. I waited. I prayed to a God I hadn't spoken to in years. Please, son, pick up the phone, push her away, save your father. But there was only silence and the sound of his weeping. He was not moving toward the phone. He was paralyzed by her greed and his own cowardice. Then Beatrice spoke up. She had been watching silent, a general observing her troops. She stepped forward. I heard the rustle of papers. Son, look at me, Beatrice said. Beatrice. Her voice was soft, gentle, the voice she used when she tucked him in at night. She knelt down on the other side of me. I could feel her body heat. It is for the best, she said soothingly. Look at him, Terrence. He is in pain. He has been in pain for so long. His heart is tired. I felt something brush against my hand. Paper. What is that? Terrence sniffled. It is a DNR, Beatrice said. A do not resuscitate order. Your father signed it last month. He told me he did not want to be kept alive by machines. He wanted to go with dignity. I wanted to scream. I had never signed a DNR. I had never even discussed it. She had forged my signature just like she forged her love for me. It is signed. Terrence asked, his voice trembling with relief. He was looking for an excuse. He was looking for permission to let me die. Yes, baby. Beatrice lied smoothly. It is his wish. If you call 911, you are going against his wishes. You are hurting him. Let him go, Terrence. Let him go to God. He is ready. He has worked so hard. Let him rest. It was a master class in manipulation. She was using my supposed suffering to justify my murder. She was twisting his love for me into a weapon against me. But Mom, he looks like he is struggling, Terrence said. That is just the body shutting down, Beatrix said, stroking my hair. It is peaceful. He is not in pain anymore. Shh. It is okay. Just let it happen. I felt Terrence's hand on my arm. He was shaking. I am sorry, Dad, he whispered. I am so sorry. I waited for him to check my pulse. I waited for him to check my breath, but he pulled his hand away. Okay, he whispered. Okay, Mom, we wait. He stood up. I heard him walk away. He walked away from his dying father. He chose the lie. He chose the money. He chose the women who were destroying us both. In that moment, Elijah Barnes died. The father who loved his son unconditionally died on that rug. The man who remained was something else entirely. Something cold, something hollow. Good boy, Beatrice said, standing up. Now, Megan, get the binder. We need to have the paperwork ready for the paramedics when we finally call them. We need the timeline to be perfect. I heard them moving around the room. They were setting the stage. Beatrice moved a chair. Megan opened a binder. Papers were shuffled. What time do we put on the report? Megan asked, her voice businesslike. Say he collapsed at 11:45, Beatrice said. That gives us a 30-minute window before we supposedly found him. It explains why he is cold. I lay there listening to them write my obituary. My ribs HD. My lungs burned from holding my breath so shallowly. I needed to move. I needed to end this charade before I actually suffocated from rage. Beatrice walked back over to me. Terrence, come here, she said. I heard him approach. We need a witness signature on the time of discovery, she said. Sign here. It says you came in and found him unresponsive at 12:15. But it is only 12:10. Terrence said, sign it. Megan snapped. Do not be difficult. We need the narrative to be tight. I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. My son was signing away his soul. He was documenting a lie to cover up a murder. He was officially an accomplice. Good, Beatrice said. Now we wait 5 more minutes. Then we call. The room fell silent again. They were standing over me. The 3 people I had trusted most in the world, my wife, my son, my daughter-in-law. They were watching me like vultures waiting for the last breath to leave my body. I knew I could not wait 5 minutes. If I waited, they would call the authorities, and once the professionals arrived, it would be harder to control the situation. I needed to strike now while they were arrogant, while they felt safe. I gathered every ounce of air in my lungs. I focused on the tickle in my throat, the dust of the carpet, the bile of betrayal. And then I let it out. I coughed. It was not a weak cough. It was a violent, explosive sound, a hacking, gasping roar that tore through the silence of the room like a gunshot. Ka-hoo, ka-hoo. I arched my back, convulsing my body on the floor. I flailed my arm, hitting the leg of the coffee table. The reaction was instantaneous. I heard a scream. It was Megan. It was a high-pitched shriek of pure terror. Beatrice gasped a sharp intake of air that sounded like a hiss. I rolled onto my back, gasping theatrically, blinking my eyes open. I stared up at the ceiling, disoriented, confused. I saw their faces looming over me. Beatrice looked like she had seen a ghost. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock and fury. The mask of the grieving widow had slipped, and beneath it was the face of a killer whose weapon had jammed. Megan was clutching her chest, backing away, her mouth open in a silent scream. She looked at Beatrice with panic, her eyes asking, "What is happening? Why isn't he dead?" And Terrence, my son. He looked terrified. But there was something else there, too. Guilt. Shame. He looked like a child caught standing over a broken vase. I sat up slowly, groaning, clutching my head. I had to sell this. I had to be the confused old man who had just had a spell. I could not let them know I had heard everything. Not yet. The trap was not fully sprung. What I rasped, my voice growly and weak. What happened? I looked around the room, blinking as if the light hurt my eyes. I looked at Beatrice. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Beatrice recovered first. She was a professional liar. I saw the gears turning in her head, calculating, adjusting, shifting the narrative. "Elijah," she stammered, forcing a tremble into her voice. "Oh my God, Elijah, you are alive." She threw herself onto her knees beside me, trying to hug me. I felt her body trembling, but it was not relief. It was rage. She was shaking with the effort of not strangling me right there on the floor. I stiffened in her embrace, but I did not push her away. I patted her back awkwardly. "Of course I am alive," I said, confused. "Why wouldn't I be? I just felt dizzy." Did I faint? Beatrice pulled back, framing my face with her hands. Her nails dug into my skin a little too hard. "You collapsed, honey," she said, tears suddenly appearing in her eyes. "You stopped breathing. We thought you were gone." I looked past her at Megan and Terrence. They were still frozen. Megan was staring at me with pure hatred. She had already spent the inheritance in her mind, and now I had snatched it back. "Terrence," I said, looking at my son, "why are you crying, boy?" Terrence wiped his eyes, his hands shaking. "Dad, we thought you died. Mom said you were gone." I chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Not yet, son," I said. "Not yet. It takes more than a dizzy spell to kill an old trucker like me." I held out my hand to him. "Help me up." Terrence hesitated. He looked at Megan. He looked for permission to help his father. That hesitation cut me deeper than any knife. Megan nodded slightly, a sharp jerk of her chin. Terrence stepped forward and grabbed my hand. He pulled me up. I leaned heavily on him, pretending to be weaker than I was. "I am okay," I said, dusting off my pants. "Just a little light-aided. Must be that new medication. Or maybe that smoothie didn't agree with me." I saw Beatrice flinch when I mentioned the smoothie. Well, Beatrice set her voice high and tight. "We should call Dr. Sterling just to be safe, or maybe take you to the ER." "No," I said firmly. "No doctors. I hate hospitals. I just need to sit down. I need some water." I walked over to my recliner and sat down. I looked at the three of them standing there. The unholy trinity. They looked like they had been caught in a spotlight. So I said, looking at the papers scattered on the coffee table, the binder, the fake DNR. "What is all this paperwork?" I asked, pointing a shaking finger. "Why is the family gathered so quickly? I was only out for a minute." Beatrice swooped in, grabbing the binder and clutching it to her chest. "Oh, this," she said quickly. "This is just church business." Megan and I were going over the budget for the charity drive. Terrence just stopped by to drop off some tools. Lies. Layers and layers of lies. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes for a second. "Well," I said, opening them again and fixing my gaze on Megan. "It is nice to see you all here. It feels like a celebration. Since we are all together, I have been thinking." I paused, letting the tension build. Maybe this dizzy spell is a sign I said. A sign of what Megan asked, her voice sharp. A sign that I need to get my affairs in order, I said. "I think it is time to make some changes." Big changes. I saw Megan and Beatrice exchange a look. Hope flared in their eyes. They thought I was going to hand it over voluntarily. They thought the near-death experience had scared me into submission. Really, Dad? Terrence asked, hopeful. Yes, son. I said I think next week we should have a family meeting, a big one, with Pastor Silas and the lawyer. I want to make sure everyone gets exactly what they deserve. I smiled at them. It was a tired, weak smile, but inside I was grinning like a wolf. They had no idea. They thought they had missed their chance, but that the outcome was still inevitable. They thought I was a confused old man preparing to sign away his kingdom. They did not know that I had just invited them to their own execution, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. The silence in my living room was heavy enough to crush a man. 3 pairs of eyes stared at me, wide and trembling, like deer caught in the headlights of an 18-wheeler. Beatrice, my wife of 40 years, looked as though she had swallowed a lemon. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together in front of her apron to hide the tremors. Megan, the woman carrying a stranger's child in her belly, had backed up against the wall, her face drained of all color. And Terrence, my son, the boy I had raised to be a man, looked like he was about to vomit on my expensive rug. They did not know what to do. They had a script for my death. They had rehearsed the tears, the phone calls, the somber nods to the paramedics, but they did not have a script for my resurrection. I sat there in my recliner, breathing heavily, letting my hands shake visibly on the armrests. I needed to sell this performance. I needed them to believe that I was a fragile old man who had just brushed shoulders with the grim reaper, not a predator who had just set a trap. Beatrice was the first to break the silence. She always was the best liar in the room. She took a step toward me, forcing a smile onto her face that looked more like a grimace of pain. Elijah. She breathed, her voice trembling with what she hoped sounded like relief. You scared us to death. You just collapsed. We were terrified. She reached out to touch my shoulder, but I flinched. It was a calculated move. I wanted her to feel my rejection, but interpret it as confusion. Terrified, I raised my voice, sounding weak and confused. Is that why the room was so quiet? Is that why I woke up on the floor with no ambulance on the way? The accusation hung in the air. I saw Megan's eyes dart to the phone on the coffee table, the one Terrence had refused to pick up. Beatrice didn't miss a beat. We were just dialing honey. She lied, her eyes wide and innocent. We were just about to hit call when you started coughing. We didn't want to move you. We didn't want to make it worse. Lies. I had laid there for 10 minutes listening to them debate my expiration time. I had heard them forge my signature on a DNR order. But I nodded slowly, letting my head ell back against the cushion. I believe you, I whispered, closing my eyes. I have to believe you because the alternative is too terrible to think about. I opened my eyes and looked straight at Megan. She flinched. You, I said, pointing a shaking finger at her. You were screaming. Why were you screaming at Terrence? Megan swallowed hard. She looked at Beatrice for help, but Beatrice was busy playing the concerned wife. I was just panicked, Elijah. Megan stammered. I didn't know what to do. I was yelling at him to help you. I let out a long, wheezing sigh. It is funny, I said in my dream, or whatever that was. It sounded like you were telling him to stop. It sounded like you were worried about money. The color drained from her face completely. For a second, I thought she might faint. That would have been poetic, but she held her ground. Greed is a powerful anchor. You were hallucinating, Dad, Terrence said quickly, stepping forward. His voice was thick with guilt. You were out of it. Your brain was just firing off random signals. We were all trying to help. I looked at my son, the traitor. He was protecting her. He was protecting the woman who had slapped him moments ago. He was protecting the lie. Maybe I said rubbing my temples. Maybe I was. It felt so real, though. The darkness, the cold. It felt like the end. I let the words sink in. I let them think about how close they had come to their payday. I needed to shift the dynamic. I needed to stop being the victim and start being the architect of their downfall. But I had to do it in a way that made them think it was their idea. I sat up straighter, groaning as if the effort cost me everything. Water, I croaked. Beatrice rushed to the kitchen. She came back with a glass of water, not the green smoothie, just clear, cold water. I took it. I sniffed it discreetly before taking a sip. It smelled clean. She wouldn't try again so soon. Not with witnesses. Not when I was awake. I drank it slowly, letting my hands shake so the water sloshed over the rim. I wiped my chin with the back of my hand. That dizzy spell, I said, my voice gaining a little bit of strength but still sounding growly. It clarified things for me. It showed me how fragile this all is, how quickly it can all go away. I looked at each of them in turn. I have been holding on too tight, I said. I have been trying to run the business, manage the properties, control the trust. I thought I had 10, maybe 20 years left. But today showed me I might not have 20 minutes. I saw the change in their faces instantly. The fear evaporated, replaced by a hungry, predatory gleam. They leaned in. They smelled blood in the water. "What are you saying, honey?" Beatrice asked softly, sitting on the arm of my chair and stroking my shoulder. "I am saying that I am tired." "B," I said, letting my shoulders slump. "I am tired of fighting. I am tired of the stress. I think it is time to let go." Megan took a step forward. Her eyes were wide, glittering with avarice. "Let go of what, Elijah?" she asked, trying to sound casual but failing. "Everything I said, the company, the accounts, the properties. I want to retire, truly retire. I want to spend whatever time I have left sitting on a porch drinking tea and waiting for the Lord to call me home. I don't want to worry about stock prices or tenants or logistics anymore." I saw Terrence look at Megan. He looked hopeful. He looked relieved. He thought his problems were over. He thought the debt collectors would stop calling. So I continued looking at my hands. "I think it is time to activate the succession plan, but not the one in the safe. That one is outdated. It splits everything up too much. It gives too much to the board of directors." I paused. I let them hang on my words. "I want to keep it in the family," I said. "I want to give it to you now while I am still alive to see you enjoy it." Beatrice gasped. It was a theatrical sound, but the greed behind it was real. "Elijah, are you sure? Are you? That is a massive decision, I am sure." I said, "I almost died on this rug today. I don't want to die with my affairs in chaos. I want to settle it. I want to name a sole heir, someone who can take the reins and manage the family legacy." Sole heir. Those two words hit the room like a bomb. I saw Megan's head snap toward Terrence. I saw Beatrix straighten her spine. I saw the alliances in the room fracture instantly. They had been working together to kill me. But now, with a single phrase, I had turned them against each other. Who would be the sole heir, the wife, the son, or the daughter-in-law, carrying the supposed golden grandchild? "I want to do this right," I said. "I don't want lawyers fighting over my bones. I want to make a public declaration, a binding transfer of power." When Megan asked, breathless, "Next week," I said, "I want to do it at the church in front of God and the community. I want Pastor Silas to preside over it. He has been our spiritual rock for 30 years. It is only fitting that he blesses the transition." Beatrice smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. Bringing Silas into it made her feel secure. She thought Silas was her ally. She thought having her lover preside over the transfer of my wealth to her son was the ultimate victory. She had no idea I knew about the affair. She had no idea I knew Terrence was his. That sounds wonderful, Elijah. She said Silas would be honored. But I added, raising a finger. There is a condition. The room froze. What condition? Terrence asked. I need to be sure, I said, looking at him. I need to be sure that I am making the right choice. My mind, it feels foggy today. That spell took a lot out of me. I need to make sure I am lucid. I need to make sure I am giving it to the person who truly has the strength to carry the barn's name. I looked at Megan. I know you think I am just a stubborn old man, Megan, I said. I know you think I am stuck in my ways. No, Elijah, I never. She started to protest. Hush. I cut her off gently. It is okay. I have been hard on you. I have been hard on all of you. But I want to make it right. I want to see who really steps up. So here's the plan. Next Sunday after the service, we will have a reception in the parish hall. I will invite the board, the partners, the family. And at that reception, I will sign the deed to the entire estate over to one person. One person, Beatrice repeated, her voice tight. Not a joint trust. No, I said firmly. Committees are weak. One leader. That is how I built this empire. That is how it will survive. I will spend this week praying on it. I will spend this week watching you. I want to see who takes care of this family. I want to see who has the heart for it. I stood up. It was a struggle. Or at least I made it look like one. I swayed on my feet. Terrence rushed to steady me again. Careful, Dad, he said. I am okay, son, I said, patting his cheek. Just weak. I think I need to go lie down. I need to rest before I call the lawyer to draw up the papers. I started to walk toward the hallway, leaning heavily on my cane, which I had grabbed from beside the chair. I stopped at the doorway and turned back to them. Oh, and Beatrice, I said, don't make me any more smoothies. I think I will stick to water for a while. My stomach is a little unsettled. I saw the flash of panic in her eyes, but she masked it quickly. Of course, honey, anything you want. I walked down the hall to my study. I closed the door and locked it. I leaned against the heavy oak wood and let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for an hour. My legs were shaking, but not from weakness, from rage. From the sheer effort of not tearing them apart with my bare hands. I walked to my desk and sat down. I pulled up the monitor to the hidden cameras I had installed months ago for security, never thinking I would use them to spy on my own family. On the screen, I saw the living room. They were huddled together. The dynamic had completely shifted. They were no longer conspirators in a murder. They were competitors in a game show. Did you hear that? Megan whispered, her voice shrill with excitement. Sole heir. He is going to sign it all over. To me, Beatrice said sharply, I am his wife. It goes to me. He said he wants a leader, Megan countered. You are old, Beatrice. He knows you can't run a logistics empire. He is looking at Terrence. He is looking at the future. He is looking at the baby. Terrence stood in the middle, looking between the two women like a lost puppy. He said, He is watching us. Terrence said, We have to be careful. We have to show him we are good. Good. Megan scoffed. We don't have to be good, Terry. We just have to be better than her. She pointed at Beatrice. Beatrice narrowed her eyes. Watch your tone, little girl. Remember who holds the keys to the medicine cabinet. They were already turning on each other. It was perfect. I turned off the monitor. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Sterling. Phase 1 complete. The bait is taken. Prepare the documents for the party and get me that DNA test kit. I need to know for sure. I sat back in my chair. I had bought myself a week to play them against each other, a week to gather the final nails for their coffins. But there was one loose end. Terrence, my son. The boy who had hesitated. The boy who had almost called 911. He was weak. Yes, he was foolish. But was he evil, or was he just a victim of these two harpies just like me? I needed to know if I was going to destroy everything. I needed to know if there was anything worth saving. I unlocked the study door and opened it a crack. I listened. I heard Beatrice and Megan arguing in the kitchen. They were distracted. I slipped out into the hallway. I saw Terrence sitting alone on the back porch, his head in his hands. He looked broken. I walked out to him. The screen door creaked. He jumped, wiping his eyes hastily. "Dad, he said you should be resting." I sat down next to him on the swing. The chains groaned. We sat in silence for a moment, looking out at the manicured lawn. "Terrence," I said softly, "I know things have been hard. I know Megan wants certain things." Terrence looked down at his shoes. "She just wants us to be secure, Dad. She worries about the baby. I know," I said. "But greed makes people do strange things, son. It makes them forget who they are." I leaned in closer, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Listen to me, Terrence. I didn't want to say this in front of them, in front of your mother." He looked up, his eyes wide. "What is it I am planning to leave it to you?" I lied. 80%. I want you to have control. I want you to be the man I know you can be." His face lit up. It was a look of pure salvation. "Really, Dad, me?" "Yes," I said. "But I am worried, son. I am worried about your wife. She seems impatient. She seems like she counts my money while I am still breathing." Terrence flinched. He knew it was true. "And your mother," I continued. "She is getting older. She is influenced easily. If I leave it to you, you have to promise me something." "Anything, Dad?" "You have to protect it." I said, "You have to protect the family legacy from people who just want to spend it, even if those people are sleeping in your bed." I saw the conflict in his eyes. He loved Megan, or he thought he did, but he was terrified of her, and he wanted the money, he wanted the power. She can be intense." Terrence admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "She pushes me. Dad, she makes me do things." "What things, son?" I asked gently. He looked at me, and for a second, I thought he was going to confess. I thought he was going to tell me about the poison, about the plan, about everything. The words were right there on his lips. But then the back door opened. Terrence Megan's voice was sharp, commanding, "Come inside, we need to talk about the guest list for next week." Terrence snapped his mouth shut. The moment was gone. The fear returned to his eyes. "I have to go," he muttered, standing up quickly. I watched him go back inside, back to his puppet master. I sighed. I had planted the seed. I had told him he was the heir. I had told him his wife was the enemy. Now I just had to wait and see if the seed would grow into a tree of suspicion that would tear their alliance apart from the inside. I stood up and looked at the setting sun. 80% I had told him he was going to get 0. He was going to get exactly what a coward deserves. But for the next 7 days, he was going to feel like a king. And that false confidence was going to be his undoing. I went back inside. I had a busy week ahead. I had hair to collect, I had a toothbrush to steal, and I had a pastor to visit. The Trojan horse was inside the gates. Now it was time to open the belly and let the soldiers out. Monday morning arrived with a silence that felt heavy and suffocating. Beatrice had left early for the farmer's market, claiming she needed fresh organic kale for her health kick. Megan was at her prenatal yoga class, stretching a body that carried a lie. Terrence was at the office, sitting at a mahogany desk I paid for, pretending to run a division of the company he did not understand. The house was empty. It was the perfect time for a burglary. I walked down the hallway to the master suite my son shared with his wife. I felt like an intruder in my own home. My heart was not pounding with fear, but with a cold, grim determination. I pushed the door open. The room smelled of lavender and expensive cologne. It was messy. Clothes were thrown over chairs. Empty wine glasses sat on the nightstand. It was the room of 2 people who had never had to work for anything in their lives. I walked into the ensuite bathroom. It was tiled in Italian marble I had imported 3 years ago, because Megan complained the old tile was tacky. I looked at the vanity. Terrence's grooming kit was spread out his razor, his expensive face creams, and his hairbrush. I picked it up. It was full of coarse black hair. I stared at it. This was the hair of the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had held when he scraped his knee, the boy I had sat up with all night when he had the flu. I remembered the pride I felt when he was born. The way I had handed out cigars at the loading dock, telling every driver that the barn's legacy was secure. I pulled a clump of hair from the bristles. It made a small tearing sound. I put the hair into a plastic Ziploc bag I had brought from the kitchen. I sealed it. I looked at the bag. It looked like trash. Maybe it was. Maybe. I put the bag in my pocket and walked out. I did not look back. I had one more stop to make. I drove my truck to the First Baptist Church. It was a massive brick building with a white steeple that pierced the blue sky. I had paid for that steeple. I had paid for the new pews. I had paid for the repaved parking lot. I parked in the back, away from the main entrance. I knew Silas's schedule better than he knew it himself. Mondays were for sermon preparation. He would be in his office. I walked in through the side door. The church was quiet, smelling of floor wax and old hymnals. I walked past the sanctuary where I had married Beatrice, where I had baptized Terrence. The memories felt like they belonged to a stranger. I knocked on the heavy oak door of the pastor's office. "Come in," Silas's booming voice called out. I opened the door. Silas was sitting behind his desk, surrounded by books. He was a handsome man, even at 70 charismatic smooth. He was drinking from a disposable coffee cup. "Elijah," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "To what do I owe this pleasure?" "Everything all right, brother." I walked in, leaning heavily on my cane. I played the part, the frail old man, the man who was losing his grip. "I am not doing so well, Silas," I said, my voice trembling. "That spell I had yesterday. It shook me. I needed to talk to someone. I needed spiritual counsel." Silas's face softened into a mask of practiced concern. He stood up and walked around the desk. "Sit down, Elijah, sit down. Beatrice told me you had a scare. We have been praying for you." He guided me to the chair. I sat down, letting out a heavy sigh. "I feel like my time is coming, Silas," I said. "And I have burdened sins I need to confess before I meet my Maker." Silas nodded, leaning back against his desk. He was holding the coffee cup in his hand. "We all have sins, Elijah. The Lord is merciful. The Lord is... What is weighing on you?" I looked at the cup. "I needed that cup. I have been proud," I said. "I have put money before God. I have judged people." Silas took a sip of his coffee. "That is common for men of your stature, Elijah. But you have been generous. Your tithes have built this church." I started to cough. It was a dry, hacking cough. I bent over, clutching my chest. "Water," I wheezed. "I need water." Silas moved instantly. "Oh my goodness. Hold on, Elijah." He turned to the mini fridge in the corner of his office. He set his coffee cup down on the edge of the desk to free his hands. As soon as his back was turned, I moved with a speed that would have shocked him. I reached out and grabbed the coffee cup. I shoved it deep into the large pocket of my jacket. In the same motion, I pulled out a crumpled tissue and dropped it on the floor as if it had fallen from my hand. Silas turned back with a bottle of water. He handed it to me. "Here, drink this." I took the bottle and drank greedily, letting the water spill onto my shirt. "Thank you," I gasped. "Thank you, Silas." He looked at the desk. He frowned slightly, noticing his cup was gone. He looked at the floor. He didn't see it. He looked confused. "I must have thrown it away," he muttered to himself. He didn't suspect me. Why would he? I was Elijah, his dumb, rich friend. "I feel better," I said, standing up. "Thank you for the water. Silas should go. Beatrice gets worried if I'm gone too long." "Of course," Elijah Silas said. walking me to the door. "Take care of yourself, brother. We need you around." I walked out of the church. The coffee cup burned against my hip. I had the samples now. I needed the truth. I drove straight to the private medical lab on the north side of the city. Dr. Aris was waiting for me. I had called him on the way. I had funded his research grant 10 years ago when the university cut his budget. He was a man who understood loyalty. I walked into his office and placed 3 items on his stainless steel desk: the Ziploc bag with Terrence's hair, the coffee cup with Silas's saliva on the rim, and the napkin I had spit the smoothie into yesterday. "What do you need?" Elijah Dr. Aris asked, putting on his gloves. I pointed to the napkin. "Test that for dioxin. I need to know the concentration." He nodded, noting it down. "And the others?" he asked, looking at the hair in the cup. I pointed to the bag. "Sample A." I pointed to the cup. "Sample B, run a paternity test. I need to know if Sample B is the father of Sample A." Aris looked at me. He knew who Terrence was. He knew who Silas was. He saw the logo on the church coffee cup. His eyes widened slightly, but he didn't say a word. He just nodded. "I will put a rush on it," he said. "Give me 4 hours." I sat in his waiting room for 4 hours. I didn't look at my phone. I didn't read a magazine. I just stared at the white wall. I thought about the last 32 years. I thought about every birthday party, every baseball game, every time I had told Terrence I was proud of him. I thought about Beatrice. I thought about how she looked at me when she handed me that smoothie. The door opened. Dr. Aris walked out. He held a manila folder in his hand. He looked pale. He looked like a man who was about to deliver a death sentence. "Elijah," he said softly, "come in." I walked into his office. I didn't sit down. "Just tell me," I said. He opened the folder. "The napkin," he said. "It is saturated with dioxin. The concentration is lethal. If you had swallowed that mouthful, you would have gone into cardiac arrest within the hour." "It wasn't a maintenance dose, Elijah. It was an execution dose." I nodded. I felt nothing. No surprise, no fear, just a cold validation. "And the DNA?" I asked. Aris took a deep breath. He looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. "Sample A and Sample B share 99.9% genetic markers. The probability of paternity is absolute." He paused. "Silas is Terrence's father." The world stopped spinning. The sound of the air conditioner faded away. The light in the room seemed to dim. I took the folder from his hand. I looked at the charts, the numbers, the undeniable scientific proof that my life was a fraud. 32 years. I had raised another man's son for 32 years. I had paid for his college. I had bought him his cars. I had given him my name. And all the while Silas was eating at my table, laughing at my jokes, and sleeping with my wife, I felt a cracking sensation in my chest. It wasn't my heart breaking. It was my heart turning to stone. The last vestige of warmth, the last drop of love I held for my family evaporated. "Thank you, doctor," I said. My voice was steady. It was the voice of a machine. I walked out of the lab. I walked out to my truck. I climbed into the driver's seat and placed the folder on the dashboard. I looked at it. It was just paper, but it weighed more than the truck itself. I did not cry. I did not scream. I sat there in the silence and let the truth wash over me. I was alone. I had always been alone. The wife I adored was a killer. The best friend I trusted was a traitor. The son I cherished was a stranger. I reached for my phone. I dialed Sterling. She answered on the first ring. "Elijah, are you okay?" she asked. I looked at the folder. "Activate Protocol Omega," I said. "Elijah, wait." "Are you sure?" Sterling asked, her voice urgent. "There is no going back. This scorches the earth." I started the engine. The rumble of the motor felt good. It felt real. I am sure I said, "Sell the house, sell the company, liquidate the stocks, close the accounts. I want every asset converted to cash or donated to the orphanage trust by Friday." "But Elijah," your family, Sterling started. I don't have a family. I cut her off. My voice was ice. I have enemies, and I am going to destroy them. I hung up the phone. I put the truck in gear. I drove toward the highway. I wasn't going home, not yet. I had one more stop to make. I needed to see Megan. I needed to look into the eyes of the woman carrying the fake grandchild and give her enough rope to hang herself. The old Elijah was dead. He died in that lab. The man driving the truck was someone new, someone who didn't feel pain, someone who only felt the need for balance. They wanted my money. They wanted my legacy. They were going to get nothing, absolutely nothing, and I was going to watch them burn. Tuesday afternoon, I parked my truck 2 blocks away from the Obsidian Room, the most pretentious coffee shop in downtown Atlanta. It was the kind of place that sold water for $10 a bottle and looked down on anyone who did not wear Italian leather. Megan had chosen the spot. She said it had the best lighting for her social media posts. I walked the 2 blocks, my cane tapping a steady rhythm on the pavement. I adjusted my tie, checking the small pearl button near the top. It was not a button. It was a high-gain lens with a microphone sensitive enough to pick up a whisper in a hurricane. I had bought it from a spy shop in Miami 10 years ago when I suspected a union rep of taking bribes. It still worked perfectly. I walked into the cafe. The air smelled of roasted beans and expensive perfume. Megan was sitting in a booth in the back corner. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving at the speed of light. She didn't look up when I approached. She didn't stand to greet her father-in-law. She just pointed to the seat opposite her without taking her eyes off the screen. "Sit down, Elijah," she said. "You are late." I sat down slowly, groaning as my joints settled. I played the part. The tired, dying old man. "I am sorry, Megan," I said, my voice raspy. "Traffic was bad, and my eyes, they are not what they used to be." Megan finally looked up. She lowered her sunglasses, staring at me with a mixture of boredom and contempt. She had ordered a tower of pastries and a large iced coffee. She hadn't ordered anything from me, so she said, crossing her arms, "You said you wanted to talk. You said it was urgent. Make it quick. I have a nail appointment at 3 Ansrus." I looked at her. She was beautiful in a sharp, manufactured way. But beneath the makeup and the designer clothes, I saw the rot. I saw the woman who had laughed about my death. I saw the woman who was passing off another man's child as my heir. I took a deep breath, clasping my hands on the table. "Megan." I began, keeping my voice low and trembling. "I know we haven't always seen eye to eye. I know you think I am old-fashioned. You are old-fashioned, Elijah." She cut in, taking a sip of her drink. "You are a dinosaur. But go on." I swallowed my pride. It tasted like ash. "I am worried, Megan," I said. "I am worried about Terrence. I know he isn't. He isn't the strongest man. I know he relies on you." Megan smirked. "Rely is an understatement. Without me, he would be living in a box under a bridge. He is useless, Elijah. He can't make a decision to save his life." I nodded, agreeing with her insults to further my own agenda. "That is why I am here," I said. "I want to make a deal with you. A private deal just between us." Megan's ears perked up. The boredom vanished. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "What kind of deal?" she asked. I reached into my jacket pocket. I moved slowly, letting my hand shake. I pulled out a thick white envelope. I slid it across the marble table. It was heavy. "Open it," I whispered. Megan picked up the envelope. She opened the flap and peeked inside. Her eyes went wide. It was cash. $500 in $100 bills. It was the emergency fund I kept in the floor safe at the warehouse. "What is this?" she breathed. "It is for you," I said. "Not for Terrence, not for the baby. For you." "Why?" she asked, looking at me with suspicion. "Because I want to ensure my son is taken care of." I lied. "I know I'm not going to be around much longer." Megan, that spell yesterday. It was a warning. When I am gone, Terrence will be lost. He needs a strong woman to guide him. He needs you. I reached out and touched her hand. She didn't pull away. She was too distracted by the money. I want you to promise me you will stay with him, I said. I want you to promise me you won't leave him when things get hard. This is a retainer, Megan. $500, $1,000 tax-free. Nobody knows about it. Not Beatrice, not the lawyers, just us. Megan looked at the money, then at me. She started to laugh. It was a cold, dry sound that turned the heads of the people at the next table. $500,000, she said, shaking her head. You think you can buy me for $500,000? I looked confused. It is a lot of money, Megan. It is a fortune to a truck driver. Maybe she sneered. She threw the envelope back onto the table. It slid across the marble and hit my water glass. This is insulting, Elijah, she hissed. Do you think I am stupid? Do you think I don't know what you have? I blinked, feigning ignorance. I don't understand. Drop the act, old man, she snapped. I have seen the files. I know about the offshore accounts in the Caymans. I know about the shell companies in Nevada. I know you have over $20 million hidden away that Beatrice doesn't even know about. My heart skipped a beat. She was bluffing. She had to be. My offshore accounts were buried under 5 layers of corporate anonymity. There was no way she could have found them. Unless Terrence had found the key to the safe deposit box. But Terrence was lazy. He never looked for anything. 20 million, I stammered. Megan, I don't have that kind of money. The business is struggling. Margins are thin. Liar, she shouted, slamming her hand on the table. Do not lie to me. I saw the statements. I know what you are worth, Elijah, and I want it all of it. I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Everything she said, her eyes burning with greed. I don't want a handout. I don't want a stipend. I want control. Next week at that party, you are going to sign over power of attorney to me, not to Terrence. To me, to you, I repeated, ensuring the microphone caught every syllable. But why Terrence is the heir? Terrence is a puppet, she spat. I pull the strings. If you give it to him, he will just lose it or let his mother take it. I am the only one smart enough to manage that money. I want full control, Elijah. The accounts, the properties, the liquid assets, everything goes into a trust with my name on it. And if I say no, I asked. Megan smiled. It was a smile that belonged on a shark. If you say no, she said, leaning in close, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper, I will ruin you. Ruin me, I asked. How I am an old man, Megan. What can you do to me? I can destroy your name, she said. I can destroy your legacy. You care about your reputation, don't you, Elijah? You care about what the church folks think. You care about your standing in the community. I nodded. Of course I do. A good name is all a man has. Well, here is what is going to happen, she said. If you don't sign everything over to me, I am going to go to the police. I am going to go to the news, and I'm going to tell them that you touched me. The world stopped. I stared at her. The accusation was so vile, so evil, I felt physically sick. You wouldn't, I whispered. I would, she said, her face hard as stone. I will tell them you cornered me in the kitchen. I will tell them you groped me while Terrence was at work. I will say you threatened to cut us off if I didn't sleep with you. I will cry, Elijah. I am a very good actress. Who do you think they will believe, the pregnant young woman or the creepy old man with the power complex? I sat there, my mouth open. This was it. This was the bottom of the barrel. She was willing to accuse me of the worst crime imaginable just to get her hands on my money. Megan, please, I begged, putting a tremor in my voice. That would kill me. The shame would kill me. Good, she said, cold and unfeeling. Then give me the money and save yourself the embarrassment. Sign the papers next Sunday. Give me the empire, and maybe I will let you visit your grandchild once a year. I looked down at the table. I looked defeated. I looked broken. Okay, I whispered. Okay, Megan, you win. I will do it. I will sign whatever you want. Just please don't say those things. Don't destroy my name. Megan smiled triumphantly. She reached out and patted my cheek. It was a patronizing gesture. Smart move, Elijah, she said. I knew you would see reason. She grabbed the envelope of cash from the table and shoved it into her purse. I will take this as a down payment, she said. Consider it a deposit on my silence. She stood up, adjusting her sunglasses. Don't be late for the party next week, she said. And Elijah, wear a nice suit. I want you to look good when you hand over my future. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the floor. She walked with a swagger. She thought she had won. She thought she had bullied an old man into submission. I sat there for a long time after she left. I waited until I was sure she was gone. Then I reached up and adjusted my tie. I tapped the pearl button twice to stop the recording. Got you, I whispered. I had it all. The extortion, the threat, the confession that she viewed Terrence as a puppet, the admission that she wanted to cut Beatrice out. It was perfect. It was nuclear. I signaled the waiter. He came over looking nervous. Can I get you anything else, sir? He asked. No, son, I said. Just the check. I paid the bill. I stood up. My knees didn't hurt anymore. My back was straight. The anger that had been burning inside me had transformed into a cold, focused energy. I walked out of the cafe. The sun was shining, but all I could see was the storm coming. Megan thought she had checkmated me. She thought she held all the cards. She didn't know I was playing a different game entirely. I walked back to my truck. I sat in the cab and replayed the recording in my head. I will tell them you touched me. Those words echoed in my mind. They were the nail in her coffin. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. I started the engine. I had one more person to visit, one more traitor to expose. Pastor Silas, my best friend, my brother, the man who had been sleeping with my wife for 30 years, the man who was the real father of the boy I raised. I drove toward the church. My hands were tight on the wheel. Megan was greed. Megan was evil. But Silas was betrayal. Silas was a wound that went soul deep. I was going to look him in the eye. I was going to shake his hand, and I was going to make sure that when he fell from the highest height possible. I pulled into the church parking lot. The sun cast a long shadow from the steeple. It looked like a spear aimed at the heart of the guilty. I am coming for you, Silas, I said to the empty truck, and God can't save you from me. Wednesday night service at First Baptist was always a spectacle, but tonight it felt like a theater of the absurd. I sat in the back pew, my hands resting on the head of my cane. The sanctuary was packed, 500 souls swaying and clapping under the warm glow of the chandeliers I had paid for. And there on the pulpit, standing under the giant cross, was the star of the show, Pastor Silas. He looked magnificent in his cream-colored suit. He held the microphone like a rock star, pacing the stage with the energy of a man half his age. He was preaching about sanctity. He was preaching about the sacred bond of marriage. Faithfulness. He boomed, his voice shaking the rafters. It is the bedrock of the soul. A man who cannot be faithful to his wife cannot be faithful to his God. The congregation shouted, Amen. I saw Beatrice in the front row. She had her hands raised, her eyes closed in rapture. She looked like a saint. She looked like the woman I had loved for 40 years. But I knew the truth. I knew that the man preaching about faithfulness had been sleeping with her since before my son was born. I knew that the woman praising God in the front row was poisoning my morning smoothie. It made me physically sick. The bile rose in my throat, bitter and hot. I gripped my cane until my knuckles ached, trying to anchor myself to the wooden pew. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march down that aisle and tear the microphone from his hand and tell these good people that their shepherd was a wolf. Silas wiped his brow with a silk handkerchief. The family, he shouted, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. The family is a garden. You must tend it. You must protect it from the weeds of sin. You must keep the bloodline pure. I almost laughed out loud. It would have been a sound of madness. Keep the bloodline pure. The audacity of this man. He had planted his own seed in my garden. He had watered it with my money. He had watched it grow while I did the work. And now he stood there lecturing me about weeds. I looked at Terence sitting next to Beatrice. He was nodding along, soaking up every word. He worshipped Silas. He looked up to him. Of course he did. Blood calls to blood. I looked at the profile of my son, the slope of the nose, the set of the jaw. I looked at Silas. It was undeniable. It was not just a resemblance. It was a mirror. For 32 years I had been blind. I had seen what I wanted to see. But now the scales had fallen from my eyes, and the truth was burning them. The service ended with a thunderous hymn. The choir sang about washing away sins. I stood there feeling dirty. I felt like the grime of their betrayal was coating my skin, and no amount of singing would ever wash it off. As the congregation began to file out, shaking hands and hugging, I made my move. I did not head for the exit, I headed for the stage. I moved slowly, dragging my leg, playing the part of the frail old man. People moved out of my way, offering sympathetic smiles. They saw Elijah Barnes, the pillar of the community who was fading away. They did not see the bomb that was ticking inside me. Silas was down by the altar greeting the faithful. He saw me approaching and his smile widened. It was a smile of ownership. He thought he owned this church. He thought he owned my wife. He thought he owned my legacy. Elijah, he said, opening his arms, so good to see you, brother. Beatrice said you were feeling better. I stopped in front of him. I leaned heavily on my cane, letting my shoulders slump. I am trying. Silas, I said, my voice weak. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Silas chuckled, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. The Lord sustains us, Elijah. He gives strength to the weary. I looked him in the eye. I searched for a flicker of guilt, a hint of shame. There was nothing, just a smooth, polished surface of arrogance. I was listening to your sermon, I said. Powerful words, Silas, about family, about bloodlines. It is the foundation of everything, Silas said, nodding gravely. Without family, we are nothing. I looked over at Terence, who was chatting with some deacons near the exit. You know, Silas, I said, keeping my voice low, conversational. I was looking at Terence tonight, really looking at him. Silas's hand tightened slightly on my shoulder. Just a fraction. Is that so? He asked. And what did you see? I turned back to Silas. I looked at his forehead. I looked at his chin. It is the strangest thing, I said, scratching my head in feigned confusion. The older he gets, the more he looks like you. The air between us froze. The sounds of the church seemed to fade away. It was just me and him standing on the altar of his lies. I watched his eyes. I waited for the panic. I waited for the denial, but it didn't come. Instead, his smile changed. It didn't disappear, but it shifted. The corners of his mouth turned up in a smirk that was pure condescension. He looked at me like I was a child who had almost solved a puzzle, but was still missing the last piece. He thought I was senile. He thought I was just an old man making a rambling observation. He felt so safe, so untouchable, that he decided to gloat. Well, Elijah, he said, his voice dripping with false humility, they say that spiritual fathers leave a mark on their sons. I have prayed over that boy since he was in the womb. I have laid hands on him. I have guided him. He leaned in closer, his cologne overpowering the smell of the church wax. "It is a blessing, Elijah," he whispered. It is the impartation of the Spirit. Sometimes when we pray hard enough, God molds the clay in our image. Beatrice and I, we prayed very hard for that boy. You were always so busy with the trucks. Someone had to do the spiritual work. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was absolute zero. He was admitting it. He was twisting it into some perverse theological miracle. But he was admitting it. He was telling me to my face that while I was out working 18-hour days to build this empire, he was in my bed, molding the clay. He was mocking me. He was laughing at me. I gripped my cane. I visualized lifting it and bringing it down across his smiling face. I visualized shattering that jaw that preached lies. The violence in my mind was vivid, terrifyingly real. But I did not move. I could not yet. If I struck him now, he would be the martyr. He would be the victim of a crazy old man. I needed him to fall from a greater height. I needed the whole world to see him for what he was. "You are right, Silas," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it cracked my face. "You did the work. You certainly did the work." I reached into my jacket pocket. "That is actually why I wanted to talk to you," I said, changing the subject abruptly. I felt the checkbook in my hand. It was the bait. Silas blinked, confused by the shift, but his eyes drifted to my hand. He smelled money. Greed was the only thing stronger than his vanity. "What is it, Elijah?" he asked. I pulled out the check I had written in the car. It was for $50,000. Next Sunday, I said, holding the check just out of his reach. The reception, the transfer of power. I want it to be perfect. I want it to be the biggest event this church has ever seen. Silas's eyes locked onto the numbers. "Elijah, that is. That is incredibly generous." I handed him the check. He took it, his fingers brushing mine. His skin felt dry like parchment. "I have a condition, Silas," I said. "Anything, Elijah. For you, anything." "I want the technology to be flawless," I said. "I want every screen in this complex turned on. The big screens in the sanctuary, the monitors in the overflow rooms, the screens in the parish hall. I want the live stream running to your Facebook page, your YouTube channel, everything." Silas looked confused, but he was already mentally spending the $50,000. "You want it broadcast?" he asked. "I want the world to see," I said, my voice rising with feigned passion. "I am handing over the Barnes legacy. I am stepping down. I want my testimony to reach everyone. I want them to see the family. I want them to see the truth." Silas beamed. He clapped his hands together. "It shall be done, Elijah. We will have the media team working overtime. We will broadcast your generosity to the four corners of the earth. It will be a celebration of stewardship." He was ecstatic. He thought he was getting a show. He thought he was getting the spotlight. He had no idea he was setting the stage for his own execution. "Excellent." I said, "I want you to manage the feed, Silas. I want you to introduce me. I want you standing right next to me when I make the announcement." "It would be my honor," he said, tucking the check into his suit pocket. I nodded. I looked at the cross behind him. It hung there silent, a witness to everything. "I should go," I said. "Beatrice will be waiting. She wants to make sure I take my medicine." Silas patted my arm. "Go home, brother. Rest. You have done a great thing today. You have secured your place in heaven." I turned and walked away. My leg dragged on the carpet, but my step felt lighter. The trap was set, the cage was locked, and the rat was inside eating the cheese. I walked past the pews, past the altar, past the lies. I walked out into the cool night air. Secured my place in heaven, he had said, maybe. But first I was going to unleash a little bit of hell, right here on earth. I climbed into my truck. I sat there for a moment looking at the church. It looked beautiful, lit up against the night sky. It looked holy. Next Sunday, those walls were going to shake. Next Sunday, the stained glass was going to rattle. I pulled out my phone and dialed Sterling. "It is done." I said, "The equipment is secured. The audience is guaranteed." "Good." Sterling said, "I have the files ready, Elijah. The video from the restaurant, the audio from the cafe, the lab results, the footage from your kitchen. It is all compiled. Is it locked?" I asked. "It is locked," she confirmed. "Password protected. Only you have the key. And I have set up a remote link. All you have to do is plug the drive into the church's system, and I can override their feed from here." "Perfect," I said. Elijah, Sterling said, her voice softening. "Are you sure you can do this? Standing up there in front of everyone. It is going to be heavy." I looked at the checkbook on the passenger seat. I thought about the $50,000 I had just given to the man who stole my life. "I am not doing it for me, Sterling." I said, "I am doing it for the truth. The truth is heavy. But it is the only thing that matters now." I hung up. I put the truck in gear. I drove home. I drove back to the woman who was crushing pills into my drink. I drove back to the son who wasn't mine. I drove back to the daughter-in-law who was sharpening her knives. Let them sleep tonight. Let them dream of their mansions and their yachts. Let them think they have won because Sunday was coming. And on Sunday, the wrath of Elijah was going to rain down like fire and brimstone. Saturday morning arrived with the buzzing of my phone against the mahogany of my desk. It was not a call. It was a notification from the bank app I had installed only 3 days ago. Transaction declined, $10,000. The location was Leto, the most expensive boutique in the city. The item code corresponded to women's formal wear. Megan was shopping. She was out there buying the dress she intended to wear while she danced on my grave. She was trying to buy a coronation gown with the king's own gold. I sat back in my leather chair and watched the screen. A second notification popped up. Transaction declined, then a third. She was trying again. She was swiping that platinum card harder, as if force could bypass the freeze I had placed on every single account 12 hours ago. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. I knew Megan. I knew her vanity. She would be standing at the counter surrounded by mirrors and obsequious sales clerks. She would be holding a glass of complimentary champagne. Terrence would be sitting on the velvet boyfriend couch, holding her purse, looking bored and useless. The card reader would beep a nasty, sharp sound. The clerk would look at the screen, her smile would falter. "I am sorry, Mrs. Barnes," the clerk would say, her voice dropping to a discreet whisper. "The card has been declined." Megan would laugh a high, nervous laugh. "Try it again," she would say. "It is a platinum card. My father-in-law has a limit higher than the national debt." "You must have swiped it wrong." The clerk would try again. And this time, the screen would flash a message that Sterling and I had programmed into the bank's security protocol manually. "Card stolen. Confiscate immediately. Call police." I imagined the color draining from Megan's face as the clerk pulled the card back and placed it under the counter. I imagined the manager stepping forward, his face serious. "Ma'am, we have instructions to retain this card." The manager would say, "The bank has flagged it as stolen property. Please do not make a scene, or we will have to contact the authorities." Stolen, Megan would shriek. "It is my card." "My name is on the authorized user list." "Not anymore." As of midnight last night, Megan Barnes did not exist in the financial system of the Barnes empire. She was a ghost, a squatter. I watched the notifications stop. Silence. She had given up. She was probably storming out of the store right now, dragging Terrence behind her, leaving the $10,000 dress on the counter. She was humiliated, she was furious, and she was terrified because if the card didn't work, that meant the money wasn't flowing. And if the money wasn't flowing, her house of cards was starting to shake in the wind. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the driveway. My truck was there. My freedom. I checked my watch, 110 a.m. right on schedule. My phone rang. It wasn't a notification this time, it was a call. Beatrice. I let it ring 3 times. I needed her to sweat. I needed her panic to build until it was choking her. On the 4th ring, I picked up. "Hello, Bay," I said, my voice calm. Slow, the voice of a man enjoying a lazy Saturday morning. "Elijah," she screamed. She wasn't pretending to be sweet anymore. Her voice was a jagged edge. "What did you do?" I pulled the phone away from my ear. Even over the line, I could hear her hyperventilating. "What do you mean, B?" I asked, feigning confusion. "I am just reading the paper. Is everything okay? The accounts, Elijah." She shrieked. I went to the ATM to get cash for the caterer's tip. It ate my card. It said the account is frozen. I checked the online portal. Everything is locked. Checking savings. The investment portfolio. It says access denied. 0 balance. "What did you do?" I paused. I let the silence stretch. I could hear her breathing ragged and harsh. She was envisioning her life crumbling. She was seeing the Miami condo disappearing. "Oh, that," I said casually. "Yes, the bank called me this morning. Terrible business." "Really, what business?" Beatrice demanded. "Fix it, Elijah. Fix it right now. We have the party tomorrow. We have vendors to pay." "Calm down, Bay," I said, soothingly. "It is just a security measure." The bank manager, Mr. Henderson, called me at dawn. He said their systems detected a massive hacking attempt originating from a foreign IP address. Someone was trying to drain the main trust fund. "A hacking attempt," she repeated. Her voice wavered. She was calculating. Was it true, or did I know yes? I continued, lying through my teeth. They traced the digital footprint. They said it looked like it was coming from, well, it is funny, actually. They said it was linked to Megan's laptop. Probably a virus she picked up. You know how young people are always clicking on things they shouldn't. I heard a gasp on the other end. I had just thrown a grenade into their alliance. Beatrice would immediately suspect Megan. She would think Megan tried to steal the money early, tried to cut Beatrice out before the old man died. Megan, she whispered, that stupid girl. So Mr. Henderson had to freeze everything I explained. It is standard protocol. Protocol Omega, they called it. He said it takes 48 hours to scrub the system and reset the firewalls. We cannot access anything until Monday. Monday, Beatrix shouted. The party is tomorrow. Elijah, the transfer of power is tomorrow. Silas is coming. The board is coming. We cannot have a reception with declined credit cards. We will be the laughingstock of Atlanta. I chuckled, a soft, senile sound. Do not worry, B, I said. I have it covered. I told Henderson to issue a special authorization. I have a checkbook, a verified cashier's checkbook. I can write checks tomorrow. Old school pen and paper checks, she asked, hopeful. Yes, I said. I will bring it to the church. When I sign the deed over to the new heir, I will also write a check to cover all the expenses and maybe a little bonus for everyone for the trouble. $1 million for the new head of the family to get started. I heard her exhale. The tension left her voice, replaced by greed. $1 million. Cashier's check. That was real money. That was liquid. Okay, she breathed. Okay, Elijah, that scares me. But we can make it work. Just bring the checkbook. Do not forget it. I won't. B, I promised. I never forget the important things. Where are you now? She asked, suspicion creeping back in. I am at the barber shop, I lied, getting a trim. I want to look my best for tomorrow. It is a big day. Yes, she said, a big day. Hurry home, Elijah. I need you here. She hung up. I stared at the phone. She bought it. She bought the lie because she had no choice. The alternative was that I knew everything. And if I knew everything, she was going to prison. Denial is a powerful drug, and Beatrice was overdosing on it. She would go to Megan now. She would scream at her about the hacking. Megan would deny it. They would fight. The cracks in their foundation would widen into canyons. They would spend the next 24 hours watching each other with suspicion, terrified that the other one was trying to steal the pot before the game was over. But they would stay. They would stay for the party. They would stay for the checkbook because greed is a leash. And I was holding the handle. I drove to the barber shop not because I needed a haircut, but because I needed to be seen. I needed witnesses to say Elijah Barnes was calm. Elijah Barnes was happy. Elijah Barnes was talking about retiring and giving it all to his family. I sat in the chair while old man Jenkins trimmed my beard. "Big day tomorrow," Elijah Jenkins said, snipping away. "I heard you were stepping down." News traveled fast in the black community, especially church news. "Yes, Jenkins," I said, closing my eyes. "It is time. I am going to bless my family. I am going to give them everything they deserve." "That is a good man," Jenkins said. "Family is everything." I nodded. Family is everything. I left the shop looking sharp. I wore my best suit for tomorrow, a navy blue 3-piece custom made in Italy. I wanted to look like a king when I dropped the guillotine. I drove past the mall. I saw Megan's car in the parking lot. She was probably in there trying to return things, trying to scrape together enough cash to buy a dress off the rack. The humiliation must be burning her alive. Good. Let it burn. I went home. The atmosphere in the house was toxic. Beatrice was in the kitchen aggressively chopping vegetables. Megan was in the living room, red-eyed and sullen. Terrence was hiding in the garage. When I walked in, they all stopped. They looked at me. They were looking for signs. Did he know? Was he faking? I smiled a big, wide, vacant smile. "Who is ready for tomorrow?" I asked, clapping my hands together. Beatrice forced a smile. "We are ready, honey. We are so ready." Megan didn't smile. She just stared at my jacket pocket looking for the checkbook. "It is going to be a beautiful service," I said. "Silas has prepared a special sermon, and I have prepared a special presentation." "Presentation?" Terrence asked, coming in from the garage. "Yes, son. I set a video, a retrospective of all our happy memories. I gave it to the AV team this morning. It is going to play right before I sign the papers." Beatrice relaxed. "Oh, that sounds lovely, Elijah." "A walk down memory lane." "Yes," I said, "a walk down memory lane." It is important to remember where we came from and who we really are. They ate it up. They were so relieved that the money was still coming that they ignored the warning signs. They ignored the fact that I looked stronger than I should for a dying man. They ignored the fact that I was too calm about the frozen accounts. They went to bed early that night. They needed their beauty sleep. They needed to look perfect for the cameras. I stayed up. I sat in the dark living room, the same room where they had watched me die 3 days ago. I held the flash drive in my hand. The presentation. I thought about the video, the footage from the restaurant, the audio from the cafe, the results from the lab. It was all there. Every lie, every betrayal, every sin. Tomorrow I wasn't just going to show them a video. I was going to show them their souls. I stood up and walked to the window. The moon was full. It cast a pale light over the driveway. I saw a shadow move near Megan's car. I squinted. It was Terrence. He was pacing back and forth, talking on his phone. He looked agitated. I unlocked the window and slid it open just an inch. "But Megan," he whispered, his voice carrying in the still night air. "What if he knows? What if the hacking thing is a lie? He doesn't know, you coward." Megan's voice hissed back from the phone on speaker. "He is senile. He is old. He believes whatever we tell him. Just stick to the script. Tomorrow we get the check. Then we put him in a home? Or we finish what we started with the pills?" "I cannot do the pills again," Terrence said. I cannot watch him die again. You won't have to, Megan said. I will do it. I will put enough in his tea to kill a horse. Once the check clears, he has expired goods. Now go to sleep. You look like a wreck. Terrence hung up. He stood there for a moment looking up at the house. He looked up at my window. I stepped back into the shadows. He knew he was part of the final solution. Even after I offered him a way out, even after I planted the seed of doubt, he chose her. He chose the murder. Any last lingering doubt I had, any last shred of mercy for my son vanished. He was not a victim. He was a volunteer. I closed the window. I went to my room. I laid out my clothes for the morning, my suit, my tie, and the checkbook. I opened the checkbook. I wrote a check. Pay to the Order of the West Side Orphanage. Amount all remaining assets. I tore the check out and put it in my inside pocket. I wrote another check. Pay to the Order of Terrence Barnes. Amount $0. I wrote a third. Pay to the Order of Beatrice Barnes. Amount $0. I put those checks in the book. I went to bed. I slept like a baby. It is amazing how peaceful you feel when you have made peace with destruction. Tomorrow was Sunday, the Lord's Day, and Elijah Barnes was bringing the judgment. The parking lot of First Baptist Church looked less like a place of worship and more like a luxury car dealership. The sun glinted off the polished chrome of Mercedes and BMWs belonging to the board members and business partners I had invited. I sat in my truck for a moment, watching the congregation file in. They were dressed in their Sunday best vibrant hats and sharp suits, moving like a colorful river toward the sanctuary. I adjusted my tie in the rearview mirror. It was the same blue tie I wore when I signed my first major contract 30 years ago. I looked at my reflection. The eyes staring back were not the eyes of a dying man. They were the eyes of a judge ready to pass sentence. I stepped out of the truck and leaned heavily on my cane. I had to maintain the illusion until the very last second. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and anticipation. Everyone knew something big was happening today. Rumors had spread through the community like wildfire. Elijah Barnes was stepping down. Elijah Barnes was giving it all away. I walked through the double doors. The sanctuary was packed, standing room only. I had paid for the expansion of this hall 5 years ago, and today it felt like a coliseum. The murmur of the crowd died down as I entered. Heads turned. I heard the whispers. He looks so frail. He looks tired. Poor Elijah. I walked down the center aisle. My leg dragged slightly on the carpet, a performance I had perfected over the last week. At the front row in the seats of honor sat the people who wanted me dead. Beatrice was wearing a white hat with a wide brim looking like the Queen Mother. She dabbed at her dry eyes with a handkerchief, playing the role of the devoted wife supporting her ailing husband. Next to her was Megan. She was wearing a modest dress that hid her figure, trying to look like the beautiful daughter-in-law. She was holding Terrence's hand. Her grip looked tight, painful. Terrence looked like he was about to faint. He was sweating despite the air conditioning. He knew the stakes. He knew that today he either became a millionaire or a pauper. And up on the pulpit, standing tall and proud, was Pastor Silas. He was wearing a robe with gold embroidery. He looked down at me with a benevolent smile, the smile of a man who thinks he has gotten away with the ultimate sin. He nodded to the camera crew I had hired. The red lights on the cameras were glowing. We were live. Thousands of people were watching online, along with the hundreds in the room. Silas stepped up to the microphone. His voice boomed through the speakers, rich and commanding. "Brothers and sisters," he said, spreading his arms wide. "Today is a day of celebration, a day of transition. We are here to honor a pillar of this community, a man who has given so much to this church and to this city, Mr. Elijah Barnes." The congregation applauded. It was a warm, genuine sound. These people respected me. They didn't know I was surrounded by vipers. Silas beckoned me forward. Come up here, Elijah. Come share your heart with us. I climbed the steps to the stage, slowly gripping the handrail. Every step was a struggle, or so I made it seem. Silas reached out and took my arm, helping me to the podium. His touch made my skin crawl. It took every ounce of my willpower not to recoil from the man who had slept with my wife and fathered the boy I raised. Thank you, Silas, I said into the microphone, my voice raspy and weak. Thank you for your friendship. Silas patted my back. The pulpit is yours, brother. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw my business partners in the second row. I saw the bank manager who had frozen my accounts on my orders. I saw Sterling sitting in the back corner, her laptop open, her finger hovering over the enter key. She gave me an almost imperceptible nod. The trap was armed. I looked down at the front row. Beatrix was beaming up at me. She tapped her purse. I knew what she was signaling. The checkbook. She wanted to make sure I had brought the checkbook. Megan was leaning forward, her eyes hungry, devouring me. She was mentally counting the money. I took a deep breath. Friends, family, partners, I began. My voice shook just enough to sell the act. You all know me as a businessman, a man who built a logistics empire from dirt. I have spent my life moving things from point A to point B. I have spent my life negotiating deals, reading contracts, and ensuring that the ledger is always balanced. I paused. I let the silence stretch. But life is not a business deal, I continued. Life is about legacy. It is about what we leave behind. Lately, my health has not been what it used to be. I had a spell last week, a moment where I saw the darkness. And in that darkness, I saw the truth. Beatrix nodded vigorously, dabbing her eyes again. She loved this narrative. It fit her script perfectly. I realized that I have been holding on too tight, I said. I have been trying to control everything. But a man cannot control the wind. He can only adjust his sails. I have decided that it is time to rest. It is time to hand over the burden of my wealth to those who have earned it, to those who truly deserve it. Megan squeezed Taryn's hand so hard I saw him wallace. She was practically vibrating. She thought I was talking about her. She thought she had earned it by threatening to destroy my reputation. I have spent the last week praying, I said. I have spent the last week watching my family, observing them, seeing how they treat me when they think I am weak, seeing how they care for me when they think I am dying. And I have seen things, wonderful things, terrible things. I saw Beatrix frown slightly. The word terrible wasn't in the script. So today I continued, my voice gaining strength, the rasp disappearing. I am going to make a decision that will change the future of the Barnes family forever. I am going to sign over the entirety of my estate, the company, the properties, the liquid assets, everything. A gasp went through the room. This was it, the moment they had killed for. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. I pulled out the checkbook. It was a long leather-bound book. I held it up. In this book lies the future, I said. Megan let out a small, audible squeak of excitement. Beatrix and she locked eyes. They smiled. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. They held hands. The black mother-in-law and the white daughter-in-law united by greed, squeezing each other's fingers in victory. They thought they had won. They thought the old man was finally doing exactly what he was told. But I said, lowering the checkbook, before I sign anything, before I hand over the keys to the kingdom, I think it is important that we all understand exactly who we are. I think it is important that this community, this church, and the world sees the true heart of the Barnes family. I looked at Silas. He looked confused. This wasn't part of the run sheet. I have prepared a video. I said, a retrospective, a collection of moments that capture the essence of the love that surrounds me. I want you all to see what I see. I want you to see the truth. Beatrix relaxed. She leaned back. She thought it was going to be a montage of family picnics and Christmas mornings. She thought it was going to be a tribute to her sainthood. Silas stepped forward, reaching for the microphone. That sounds beautiful, Elijah. A tribute to a godly family? Yes, I said, stepping back from the podium. A tribute. Sterling, if you please. I looked at Sterling in the back. She hit the key. The massive LED screens behind the choir loft flickered to life. The screens in the overflow rooms lit up. The live stream feed switched from the camera on my face to the direct feed from the computer. The sanctuary lights dimmed. The room went quiet. Everyone looked up expectantly, waiting for sentimental music and soft focus photos. Instead, the screen was dark and grainy. It was security footage, black and white. The timestamp in the corner read 11:45 p.m. The location tag said VIP Lounge. The sound of a door opening boomed through the church's state-of-the-art sound system. On the massive screen 20 ft high, Beatrice walked into the room. She looked vibrant. She looked nothing like the frail woman sitting in the front row. Then Megan walked in wearing her wedding dress. The sound of a cork popping echoed like a gunshot. To the stupidest man in Atlanta, Megan's voice rang out, crisp and clear, amplified by $50,000 worth of audio equipment. The congregation gasped. It was a collective sound of shock. Beatrix in the front row froze. Her hand stopped halfway to her mouth. On the screen, Beatrice laughed. To Elijah, the goose that lays the golden eggs. I watched the crowd. They were confused. They didn't understand yet. They thought maybe it was a joke, a skit. Then Megan sat down on the screen and put her feet up. God, I thought today would never end, she said. Did you see his face when he gave us the deed? He actually thinks I want to spend my weekends at a lake house with mosquitoes. The confusion in the room turned to horror. People started whispering. Beatrice stood up. She turned around looking at the projection booth. Her face was a mask of panic. Rah, what is this? She shouted. Turn it off. This is a mistake. Sit down, Beatrice. I roared into the microphone. My voice was no longer weak. It was the voice of a man who commanded fleets. Sit down and watch. Silas looked at me, his eyes wide. Elijah, what are you doing? This is not appropriate for church. It is the truth. Silas, I snapped. And the truth shall set you free. Watch on the screen. The conversation continued. It is an asset, honey, Beatrix said on screen. We liquidated in 6 months. That is $500,000 in cash. The whispers grew louder. People were pointing. Then came the moment that turned the room to ice. Megan rubbed her stomach on screen. I just hope Terrence doesn't get suspicious. It is hilarious. He thinks this baby is his. He is so dumb. He actually believes the timeline works. Terrence, who had been sitting paralyzed, slowly stood up. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at Megan beside him. His face was gray. Megan grabbed his arm. Terrence, that is fake. It is AI. He made it up. But the video kept playing. Whatever you do, Beatrix said on screen, do not let Elijah find out about the personal trainer. If he asks for a DNA test, we lose everything. The crowd erupted. It was chaos. Shouting gasps. Someone in the back screamed, "Oh my Lord!" Beatrice was screaming now. Stop it right now. Silas, do something. Silas moved toward the soundboard, his face pale. Cut the feed, he yelled to the tech crew. Do not touch that board, I shouted, pulling back my jacket to reveal the shoulder holster I wore for security when I carried cash. I didn't draw the weapon, but the implication was clear. Let it play. The tech crew didn't move. They were glued to the screen. Megan stood up on the screen and poured more champagne. So what about the main event? When does Elijah retire permanently? Beatrice on screen took a sip. Soon. I switched his heart medication 3 weeks ago. I have been crushing dioxin into his morning smoothies. One day he will just go to sleep and not wake up. The sanctuary went silent. Absolute deathly silence. The kind of silence that happens when a bomb goes off and the air is sucked out of the room. Poison, murder. Beatrice collapsed into her pew. She didn't faint. She just crumpled under the weight of 500 witnesses seeing her soul. Terrence was staring at his mother. He looked like a man who had just been shot. "Mom," he whispered. "Mom, you said he was sick." The video ended. The screen went black for a second. Then a new image appeared. It was shaky footage, hidden camera footage. It was me and Megan at the cafe. If you say no, Megan's voice hissed through the speakers. "I will ruin you. I will tell them you touched me." The crowd roared with outrage. Men stood up, fists clenched. Women covered their mouths. "I will tell them you cornered me in the kitchen. I will say you threatened to cut us off if I didn't sleep with you." Megan in the front row covered her face with her hands. She was sobbing, but nobody was comforting her. People were moving away from her as if she were contagious. I stood at the podium looking down at them. I looked at the wreckage of my family. "You wanted a show," I said into the microphone. "You wanted a legacy. Well, here it is. But I am not done," I said. "There is one more truth, one more secret that has been hidden in this church for 30 years. I turned to Silas. He was trembling. He knew what was coming. He tried to run toward the side exit, but the deacons, the men I had helped for years, blocked his path. I signaled Sterling. The screen changed one last time. It showed a document, a DNA test. Sample of Terrence Barnes, sample B, Silas Jenkins. Probability of paternity 99.9%. The gasp that went through the room this time was not shock. It was a sound of collective heartbreak. I looked at Terrence. He looked at the screen. He read the words. He looked at Silas. "No," he wailed. It was a sound of pure agony. "No." I looked at Silas. "You wanted to keep the bloodline pure, Silas." I said, my voice cold as the grave. "You wanted to mold the clay. Well, there is your masterpiece." The church was in pandemonium, but I stood still. I stood tall. I had burned it all down. And now I was just watching the ashes fall. The massive LED screen behind the choir loft flickered to life. It was a monolith of technology usually reserved for displaying hymn lyrics or announcements about the church picnic. But today it was a canvas for betrayal. The image that appeared was not a slideshow of family vacations or Christmas mornings. It was grainy black and white footage. The timestamp in the corner read 11:45 p.m. The location tag was stark and clinical. VIP Lounge. The silence in the sanctuary was absolute. It was the kind of silence that precedes a tornado. 500 people held their breath simultaneously. On the screen, a door opened. Beatrice walked in. She was not the frail, teary-eyed woman currently sitting in the front pew, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. The woman on the screen was vibrant. She walked with a swagger. She went straight to the minibar and popped a bottle of champagne with expert ease. Then Megan entered. She was still wearing her wedding dress. She kicked off her heels and flopped onto the sofa. The audio kicked in. I had paid extra for the sound engineering, and it was worth every penny. The voices were crisp, clear, and booming through the sanctuary speakers. "To the stupidest man in Atlanta," Megan said, raising her glass. Beatrice laughed. It was a cold, harsh sound that echoed off the vated ceilings of the church. "To Elijah the goose that lays the golden eggs." A gasp rippled through the congregation. It started in the front rows and moved backward like a wave. I saw my business partners exchange confused glances. I saw the bank manager lean forward, his eyes narrowing. Beatrice in the real world froze. Her hands stopped mid-air holding her handkerchief. She stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open. The video continued. Megan put her feet up on the coffee table. "God, I thought today would never end," she said on the screen. Did you see his face when he gave us the deed? He actually thinks I want to spend my weekends at a lake house with mosquitoes? Beatrice on screen took a sip. It is an asset, honey. We liquidated in 6 months. That is $500,000 in cash. The whispering started. It was a low buzz at first, but it was growing. People were turning to look at Beatrice. They were looking at the woman they thought was a saint. Then came the part that I knew would twist the knife. Megan rubbed her stomach on the screen. I just hope Terrence does not get suspicious. It is hilarious. He thinks this baby is his. He is so dumb he actually believes the timeline works. Terrence, who had been staring at the floor, slowly lifted his head. He looked at the screen. Then he turned his head slowly, mechanically, to look at Megan sitting beside him. His face was the color of ash. Megan grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his suit jacket. Terrence, that is not real, she hissed. But the video was relentless. It was, whatever you do, Beatrice said on screen, her voice magnified to a roar. Do not let Elijah find out about the personal trainer. If he asks for a DNA test, we lose everything. The sanctuary erupted. It was no longer a church service, it was a riot. People shouted. Someone in the back screamed out, "Oh Lord, have mercy." A woman in the choir dropped her hymnal. Beatrice shot up from her pew. She spun around facing the projection booth, her face twisted into a mask of pure panic. Turn it off, she screamed. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. Turn it off right now. This is fake. It is a lie. She pointed a shaking finger at the screen. It is AI, she yelled, looking desperately at the congregation. You have seen the news. Seen. They can fake anything now. My husband is sick. His mind is gone. He made this up to hurt me. Silas stepped forward, his hands raised, trying to regain control of his flock. Brothers and sisters, please, Silas shouted. There must be a technical malfunction. I gripped the podium. I leaned into the microphone. Sit down, Beatrix. I roared. My voice thundered through the speakers, drowning out her screams, drowning out the crowd, drowning out Silas. I am not done yet, I shouted. You wanted the truth. You wanted a legacy. Well, sit down and watch it. Beatrice looked at me. For the first time in 40 years, she looked at me with fear. She saw the man she thought she had killed standing there like an avenging angel. She collapsed back into the pew not because she wanted to obey, but because her legs gave out. The screen flickered again. The image changed. This time, it was shaky footage. The angle was low, looking up from a button on a shirt. It was the hidden camera footage from the cafe. The setting was the obsidian room. The lighting was moody, but Megan's face was clear. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, looking bored and arrogant. The audio was intimate. It sounded like she was whispering directly into the ears of every person in the room. If you say no, Megan's voice hissed, I will ruin you. The crowd went silent again. The shock of the first video had stunned them, but this was different. This was predatory. I will tell them you touched me, Megan said on the screen. I will tell them you cornered me in the kitchen. I will say you threatened to cut us off if I did not sleep with you. A collective groan of disgust rose from the pews. The men in the room, fathers, grandfathers, brothers, clenched their fists. To accuse a man of that, to weaponize his reputation against him, it was a sin that went beyond greed. It was evil. I will cry. Elijah Megan continued on screen, a cruel smile playing on her lips. I am a very good actress. Who do you think they will believe, the pregnant young woman or the creepy old man? In the front row, Megan covered her face with her hands. She curled into herself, trying to disappear. Terrence pulled his arm away from her violently. He shifted in the pew, putting inches of space between them. He looked at her with a mixture of horror and revulsion. I looked down at them. I felt no pity. I felt only the cold satisfaction of justice. But I wasn't finished. I had one more clip. The smoking gun. Sterling hit the key. The screen changed again. This time, it was high-def and color footage. It was from the hidden camera I had installed in the kitchen light fixture just 3 days ago. The timestamp was recent Wednesday morning. The camera looked down on the granite island. Beatrice was there. She was humming Amazing Grace, the same song she sang in the choir. The sound of her humming filled the church, haunting and twisted. She opened a small pill bottle. She poured a handful of white pills onto the counter. She took a heavy mortar and pestle and began to crush them. The grinding sound was amplified. Grind, grind, grind. She scooped the white powder into a glass. She poured green liquid over it. She stirred it. Then she picked up her phone. The audio picked up her voice clearly. "He's coming back," she said into the phone. "I put a double dose in. It should happen quickly today. Get the paperwork ready." The congregation was paralyzed. This was not fraud. This was not extortion. This was attempted murder. I watched the faces of my friends, the people I had known for decades. They looked sick. They looked terrified. They were realizing that they had been breaking bread with a monster. Beatrice was not screaming anymore. She was staring at the screen catatonic. She was watching herself prepare to kill her husband. She was watching her soul be laid bare before God and everyone she knew. The video ended with me walking into the kitchen and taking the glass. The screen went black. I stood at the podium. The silence was heavy, suffocating. I looked at Beatrice. "You said I was sick, Bea?" I said, my voice calm, but carrying to the back of the room. "You told everyone I was weak. You told them I was dying." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the handkerchief, the one I had spit the smoothie into. It was stained green, stiff with dried liquid. I held it up. "This is the sickness," I said. Again crushed into my breakfast by the woman who swore to love me until death do us part. I tossed the handkerchief down onto the floor in front of the pulpit. It landed with a soft thud. "You wanted death," I said. "You wanted a funeral. Well, you got one, but it is not mine." I turned to the side of the stage. Sterling was standing there. She held up a manila envelope. She nodded. It was time for the final blow. The strike that would shatter the last lie holding this family together. I looked at Terrence. He was weeping. His head was in his hands. He was broken. He thought he had lost his father. He thought he had lost his wife. He thought he had lost his mother. He had no idea that he was about to lose himself. I signaled the tech booth. The screen lit up one last time. It was not a video. It was a document, a PDF file blown up to the size of a billboard. It was a DNA test result from the private lab. At the top, in the bold letters, it read paternity test. Subject A, Terrence Barnes. Subject B, Silas Jenkins. I heard Silas gasp behind me. I heard him shuffle his feet trying to back away, but there was nowhere to go. The eyes of 500 people were fixed on that screen. I read the results into the microphone. Probability of paternity, I read 99%. The sound that came from the congregation was not human. It was a low rumble of shock and betrayal. They looked at their pastor, the man who preached faithfulness, the man who preached purity. I turned around slowly. I looked Silas in the eye. He was trembling. Sweat was pouring down his face, ruining his expensive makeup. "You wanted to mold the clay, Silas," I said. "You wanted to leave your mark." "Well, there he is." I pointed at Terrence. Terrence looked up. He looked at the screen. He read the words. He looked at Silas. Then he looked at me. His face crumbled. It was the look of a man whose entire identity had just been erased. "No," he wailed. It was a sound of pure agony. "Dad, no. I am not your father, Terrence." I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I never was. I was just the bank account. I was just the fool who paid the bills while your real father preached about morality." I looked back at the screen. "And Megan," I said, "my dear daughter-in-law." The image changed. It was another DNA test. This one was prenatal. Subject Megan Barnes, alleged father Taryn Barnes. Result 0% probability. Subject Chad, the trainer. Result 99.9% probability. Megan let out a scream that tore through the sanctuary. She jumped up trying to run, but her dress caught on the pew. She fell to her knees, sobbing. "You are all liars," I shouted. "Every single one of you. You built a castle on a swamp of lies, and you thought I was too stupid to notice the smell." I looked out at the crowd. "I invited you here to witness a transfer of power," I said, "and that is what you are going to see." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the checkbook, the one Beatrice had been so desperate for. I opened it. I ripped out a check. "I have liquidated the company," I said. "I have sold the properties. I have drained the accounts." I held up the check. "This is for $25 million," I said. "It is everything, every dime I have." I looked at Terrence. I looked at Beatrice. I looked at Megan. "And I am giving it all," I said, my voice ringing out like a bell, "to the West Side Orphanage, because they are the only children in this city who actually need a father." I walked down the steps of the podium. I walked past Silas, who was slumped against the altar. I walked past Beatrice, who was staring into nothingness. I walked past Terrence, who was curled into a ball on the floor. I walked down the center aisle. The congregation parted for me like the Red Sea. They looked at me with awe. They looked at me with fear. I walked out the double doors into the bright, blinding sunlight. I was alone. I had no wife. I had no son. I had no money. But for the first time in 40 years, I was free. The silence in the sanctuary was fragile like glass, waiting to shatter. I stood at the podium looking down at the man who had called me father for 32 years. Terrence was trembling. His face was a mask of confusion and terror. He looked at me, pleading with his eyes, begging me to stop, begging me to save him from the avalanche I had started. But I could not save him. I could not save a man who had stood by and watched me die. I signaled Sterling again. The massive screen behind me flickered. The image of the poison handkerchief vanished, replaced by a document that was stark and clinical. It was a DNA test report. The font was large, legible, even from the back row of the balcony. "Terrence," I said, my voice booming through the speakers. "Look at the screen, son. Look at the truth your mother has hidden from you since the day you were born." Terrence slowly turned his head. He looked at the screen. The words were undeniable. Paternity test. Alleged father Elijah Barnes. Probability of paternity %. A gasp ripped through the crowd. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room, but I wasn't done. The slide changed. A new document appeared. Alleged father Silas Jenkins. Probability of paternity 99.9%. I watched the realization hit Terrence like a physical blow. He staggered back, clutching the pew for support. He looked at the screen, reading the name over and over again. Silas Jenkins, the man he called Uncle Silas, the man who had baptized him, the man who was currently cowering against the altar trying to find a way out. "You are not my son, Terrence," I said, my voice cold and devoid of the warmth I had given him for 3 decades. "You never were. You were a cuckoo bird laid in my nest. I fed you, I clothed you, I educated you, but you do not share my blood. You share his." I pointed a shaking finger at Silas. The pastor was sweating profusely, his expensive suit stained with perspiration. He looked at Terrence, and for the first time I saw fear in his eyes, not fear of God, fear of the mob. Silas tried to move. He lunged toward the side door designated for the choir, but the deacons were faster. These were men I had helped, men whose mortgages I had paid, men whose children I had sent to camp. They blocked the door. Their arms crossed their faces set in stone. Silas bounced off them like a rubber ball. He was trapped. Terrence looked at Silas. He looked at the man's forehead. He looked at the man's chin. He saw the mirror image of his own face. 32 years of lies came crashing down. "Mom," Terrence whispered, turning to Beatrice. "Mom, tell him it is a lie. Tell him it is AI." Beatrice did not answer. She sat frozen, staring at nothing. Her world had ended. She knew there was no lie big enough to cover this. Her silence was the loudest confession in the room. Terrence let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He grabbed his hair, pulling at it as if he could rip the truth out of his mind. He looked at me, his eyes wide and wet. "Dad, please," he begged. "It doesn't matter. I am still your son. I am still Terrence." I looked at him. I felt a flicker of the old love, the ghost of the father I used to be. But then I remembered the DNR. I remembered his hesitation. I remembered him signing the paper while I lay on the floor. "No," I said softly. "You are not my son. A son protects his father. A son does not sign his father's death warrant for a check. You are Silas's son. You have his blood and you have his character. Weak, greedy, and disloyal." I turned my gaze to Megan. She was trying to make herself small, trying to disappear into the woodwork of the pew. She thought the storm was focused on Terrence. She thought she could slip away in the chaos. "And you, Megan?" I said, my voice sharpening. "My dear daughter-in-law, or should I say the mother of my supposed heir." Megan flinched. She looked up at me, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit. "You were so worried about the trust fund," I said. "You were so worried about the timeline. You told Beatrix the baby would secure the fortune. You told her it didn't matter who the father was, as long as Terrence signed the birth certificate." Megan stood up. Her face was red with rage and humiliation. "Shut up, old man," she screamed. "You don't know anything?" "This baby is a Barnes." "It is Terrence's baby, is it?" I asked. "Are you sure about that? Because I seem to recall you mentioning a personal trainer, a man named Chad." The screen changed again. This was the final nail. It was a series of photos, high-definition telephoto shots, taken by the private investigator Sterling had hired. The first photo showed Megan entering a budget motel on the outskirts of town. She was wearing a hoodie trying to hide her face, but there was no mistaking her. The second photo showed a man opening the door. He was young, fit, wearing a gym tank top. He pulled her inside. The third photo was a document, a prenatal paternity test. The sample had been obtained from the amniocentesis fluid Megan had done last week. I had pulled strings. I had called in favors. I had paid a lot of money to get those results intercepted. Subject fetus. Alleged father Terrence Barnes. Probability of paternity friend. Alleged father Chad Miller. Probability of paternity 99.9%. The crowd erupted. It was pandemonium. People were standing on the pews, shouting, pointing. The sanctity of the church was gone, replaced by the visceral thrill of justice being served raw and bloody. Megan screamed. It was a primal sound of defeat. She clawed at her face, her nails, and leaving red streaks on her perfect makeup. She looked at Terrence. Terrence was staring at the screen. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. He had lost his father, he had lost his mother, and now he had lost his wife and his child. He realized in that moment that he was the biggest fool in Atlanta. He had been played by everyone. He had betrayed the only man who ever loved him for a woman who was carrying another man's child and a mother who had used him as a pawn. "You lied to me," Terrence whispered. His voice was small, broken. "You said it was mine. You swore on your life it was mine." Megan turned on him, her face twisted into a mask of pure venom. "Of course I lied," she spat. "Look at you. You are pathetic. You are weak. Why would I want a child with you? I wanted the money, Terrence. I wanted the life." "Chad has no money. He lives in a studio apartment. You were my ticket out, and you were too stupid to see it." She pushed him. She shoved him hard in the chest. "You couldn't even kill your father, right?" she screamed. "You hesitated. If you had just let him die on the floor, we would be rich right now. But you are a coward. You are a failure." Terrence staggered back. He looked at his hands, the hands that had signed the DNR, the hands that had failed to dial 911. He looked up at me. He looked at Silas. He looked at Beatrice. He let out a roar of anguish. He fell to his knees in the middle of the aisle. He beat his fists against the carpet. He wailed like a wounded animal. It was the sound of a man realizing he had sold his soul for absolutely nothing. I watched him. I felt no satisfaction, only a deep, cold hollowness. The surgery was complete. The cancer had been cut out. But the patient was left with a gaping wound that would never heal. I looked at the congregation. They were stunned silent now, watching the destruction of the Barnes family. They had come for a celebration. They had gotten a massacre. "This is the truth," I said into the microphone, my voice weary. "This is the legacy you all envied, lies adultery, theft, murder." I looked down at the three people in the front row and the man cowering by the altar. "I am done," I said. "I am washing my hands of you, all of you." But the law isn't done. The wail of sirens cut through the humidity of the Georgia morning. It was a sharp, piercing sound that grew louder with every second, drowning out the murmurs of the congregation. I had timed it perfectly. Sterling had made the call the moment the video of the poisoning played. The police were not coming to investigate, they were coming to arrest. The heavy oak doors at the back of the sanctuary burst open. Sunlight flooded in, silhouetting 6 uniformed officers and the chief of police himself. Chief Miller was a good man, a man I had played poker with for 20 years. He walked down the center aisle, his face grim, his hand resting on his belt. Sterling stood up from her seat in the back and pointed to the front row. "That is them, Chief," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Beatrix Barnes and Megan Barnes. We have digital evidence of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and fraud. And Silas Jenkins for embezzlement and fraud." The officers moved with efficiency. 2 of them flanked Silas at the altar. He tried to straighten his robe, tried to regain some of his pastoral dignity. "This is a mistake," he stammered. "I am a man of God. You cannot arrest me in my own church. You are a thief," Silas, Chief Miller said, snapping the handcuffs onto his wrists. "We have the bank records. We know about the church funds you funneled into Beatrix's private accounts. You are under arrest." They dragged him away. The man who had preached faithfulness was marched out in irons past the flock he had fleeced. 2 other officers approached the front row. Beatrice did not move. She sat there staring straight ahead, her eyes glassy. She did not resist when they pulled her to her feet. She did not speak when they read her rights. She was in shock. Her mind had snapped under the weight of the exposure. Megan, however, fought. She screamed. She kicked. She tried to bite the female officer who grabbed her arm. "Get off me!" she shrieked. "I am pregnant. You cannot touch me. I will sue you. I will sue everyone." "Elijah, tell them. Tell them it was a joke." I looked down at her from the podium. I looked at the woman who had threatened to destroy my reputation with the vilest of lies. "It is no joke, Megan," I said calmly. "The napkin with the poison is in the lab. The video of you plotting my death is on the server. You're going to prison, and your child will be born behind bars. Maybe Chad can visit you on weekends." They dragged her out, kicking and screaming her curses, echoing off the vaulted ceiling, until the doors swung shut behind her. The sanctuary was quiet now. The only sound was the sobbing of one man, Terrence. He was still on his knees in the aisle. He had not been arrested. He had not committed a crime. Technically, he was just a coward. He was just a fool. I walked down the steps of the podium. My cane clicked on the floor. I walked until I was standing right in front of him. He looked up at me. His face was swollen, his eyes red. He looked like a broken child. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, I am sorry. Please, I didn't know about the poison. I didn't know about Silas. I just wanted to be happy." I looked down at him. I looked at the boy I had raised, the boy I had loved. "You are not going to jail, Terrence." I said, "Not today. You didn't mix the poison. You just watched me drink it." Hope flared in his eyes. He reached out to grab my pant leg. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you. I will make it up to you. I promise we can start over." I took a step back, moving my leg out of his reach. "No," I said, "we cannot." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the checkbook. The leather was warm in my hand. I opened it. I ripped out the last check, the one I had written last night. I let it flutter down to the floor in front of him. He scrambled to pick it up. He looked at the numbers. 0. Pay to the order of Terrence Barnes. $0 and 0. I told you I was giving the estate to the person who deserved it. I said, and I have. I pointed to the back of the room where the director of the Westside Orphanage was sitting, looking stunned. "I sold the company yesterday, Terrence," I said. "I sold the properties this morning. I liquidated the stocks. It is all gone, every penny, $25 million. It has all been donated to the orphanage trust." Terrence stared at the check. He shook his head. But how will I live?" he stammered. "I have no job. I have debt." The house belongs to the new owners," I said. "You have 24 hours to vacate. The cars are leased. They go back tomorrow. You have nothing, Terrence. You are 32 years old and you are starting from 0. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You are not a victim's son. You are a man who made a choice. You chose the easy way. You chose the lie. Now you have to live with the truth. You have to work. You have to sweat. You have to struggle just like I did. Maybe it will make a man out of you yet. But I won't be there to see it." I straightened up. I adjusted my jacket. "I am done," I said. I turned my back on him. I walked down the aisle. The congregation parted for me. They looked at me with awe. They looked at me with fear. They saw a man who had burned his own life to the ground to cleanse it of rot. I walked out of the double doors. The sun was blinding. The heat of the day hit me, but I felt cool. I felt light. Parked at the curb was not my old truck. It was a convertible, a vintage 1967 Shelby Cobra Cherry Red. It was the car I had always wanted. The car Beatrice said was too flashy, too irresponsible. I had bought it cash yesterday. I walked over to it. I opened the door. I threw my cane into the passenger seat. I didn't need it anymore. The weight I'd been carrying was gone. I climbed into the driver's seat. The leather was hot. I put on a pair of aviator sunglasses. I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. I saw Terrence standing in the doorway of the church watching me. He looked small. He looked insignificant. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a deep, throaty growl that vibrated in my chest. I shifted into gear. I didn't wave. I didn't look back. I pressed the gas pedal and the car shot forward. I drove away from their church, away from the lies, away from the family that never was. I was 70 years old. I had no wife. I had no son. I had no empire. But as the wind hit my face and the road stretched out before me, I realized something. I was free. And for the first time in 40 years, the road ahead belonged only to me. I spent 40 years building an empire, believing that providing for my family was the same as being loved by them. I was wrong. I learned that the most dangerous enemies are often the ones sleeping under your own roof. I learned that blind trust is not a virtue. It is a liability. Real family is not defined by DNA or marriage certificates. but by loyalty and respect. If you have to pay for affection, you are just renting a lie. I walked away with nothing but my dignity. And that turned out to be enough. Sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you needed to find the freedom you actually deserve. If this story of betrayal and redemption resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Let me know in the comments.